Yeah, open it up with hand farts. You can't stop me. You can't stop me. It's just who I am. It's just who I am. You can't stop me. Yeah. There we go. There's a stupid way to begin. Let's do it. Let's begin with stupid garbage. How y'all doing today, guys? Good evening to you, Eric. Hope you're feeling well, bud. Hope you're feeling well. A good one from Robert Reich, right? Robert Reich doing a pretty good job of summarizing what's going on in the world for us in a nice little snippet. When a handful of giant corporations control entire industries, they can raise prices with impunity and rake in record profits. They can then turn around and blame government spending on social programs for inflation. It's exactly what we're seeing today. Good to see you, Oddity. Yeehaw to you, sir. Yep, here we are, right? Here we are. That's just the truth of it. Yeah, I got cut off last night. Sorry about that, guys, for those who are watching. Power outage. Just lost power. And of course my phone was dead, so I had no way to get onto the Discord to tell anybody that I had power outage. Yeah, and I was out of power until like 1, so like 4 or 5 hours, no power. They were doing some construction work just out here, yeah. Yes, I was talking about Trudeau's Emergency Act. I know, the timing of it was so brilliant, wasn't it, DM? I was literally like, Trudeau is the most far-right political party that exists here in Canada today. It's extreme actions, and then cut. When it happened, I like burst into laughter. I was just like, that's pretty good timing, dude. That's pretty good timing, right? I'm actually far more concerned now about, in regards to this sort of censorship idea. Oh, who's this handsome devil? This fellow here has got me, I forget his name, J.J. McCullough? Yeah, J.J. McCullough. He went to the House and was talking about Bill C-11. He's a YouTuber himself, and he's very poignant, very prescient, and he's finally, it's a voice that's got me worried about Bill C-11 in more serious ways. That it is going to introduce a form of censorship into the conversation. It allows the government to decide what is or is not Canadian content. That's the fundamental core of what's being done. And it's not enough that it's like, I am a Canadian talking about Canadian politics in Canada, right? If we take a look at how the CRTC operates within the television media, that there's all of these checks and all of these sorts of things that you need to go through to prove that you are a Canadian doing Canadian content, and it all smacks of a kind of censorship is really what it comes down to. That will people like me pass the mustard, or could the government simply say, oh, this guy's a communist, we're going to come down the right. Yes, I know. I thought about that myself, DM, right? But it's a more subtle interaction, and I think that what is going to occur, and what J.J. McCullough is really revealing, is that it's not going to overtly censor people. Like, that's the thing, right? To violate the charter, the government would literally have to be like, get off the platform, right? This introduces a new, more subtle interaction where the government puts in this idea of, oh, we want Canadian content platformed, and they can decide what is or is not Canadian platform quality, right? It, at the very least, is very concerning for people like myself and people like J.J. McCullough. So it's something I'm keeping an eye on. It's something that I'm always interested in hearing. I'll be playing this later. And I actually think, absolutely, like, I think that if they pass a piece of legislation that makes it so that YouTubers can't get platformed or are shadow banned or any of that kind of stuff, like, it is a violation of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, right? And that's what J.J. McCullough is revealing here and airing his concerns. So Hey Major, how you doing? And while that's going on, let's not bullshit ourselves, right? We are entering a McCarthyian period. I shouldn't say entering. We are in a McCarthyian period. And here's a great example of it. This comes from Caitlin Johnstone, right? The great and powerful. Silicon Valley corporations are taking control of history. So Twitter has imposed a week-long suspension on the account of writer and political activist Danny Haiphong for a thread he made on the platform disputing the mainstream Tiananmen Square massacre narrative. I've got that thread right here, right? I'm going to go through this real quick because I do think it is important. So every June 4th, Western propagandists remind us of the Tiananmen Square massacre to smear China. The truth? No massacre occurred on the square, and the violence that took place Beijing during that time was part of a failed color revolution backed by the United States. 3 years prior to the Tiananmen incident, George Soros had started an NGO that had influence in Beijing, calling the Fund for Reform and Opening of China. Key protest leaders and rioters were supported by Soros's organization and was promptly closed following unrest. Here's a post from the Washington Post. Fund's representatives arrested in China. While Western media has portrayed the event as a Chinese government massacre, journalists on the ground rejected this premise. Graham Earnshaw of Reuters saw no violence in the square and said at least half of the deaths that occurred were Chinese cops and soldiers. From CBS News. In short, nothing to even suggest, let alone prove, that a massacre occurred in Tiananmen Square. Thus wrote CBS News reporter Richard Roth. BBC News. I was one of the foreign journalists who witnessed the events that night. There was no massacre in Tiananmen Square. That's James Miles, BBC reporter, writing in 2009. CBS News, there was no Tiananmen Square. New York Times. On June 13th, 1989, New York Times reporter Nicholas Kristof, who was in Beijing at the time, wrote, state television has even shown film of students marching peacefully away from Tiananmen Square shortly after dawn, as proof that they were not slaughtered. In that article, he also debunked an unidentified student protester who had claimed in a sensational article that Chinese soldiers with machine guns simply mowed down peaceful protesters in Tiananmen Square. I'm going to bookmark this, man. This is real good. Reuters. Graham Earnshaw was in the Tiananmen Square on the night of June 3rd. He didn't leave the square until the morning of June 4th. He wrote in his memoir that the military came, negotiated with the students, and made everyone, including himself, leave peacefully, and that nobody died in the square. But did people die in China? Yes. About 200 to 300 people died in clashes in various parts of Beijing around June 4th, and about half of those who died were soldiers and cops. A WikiLeaks cable also corroborated that no violence occurred on Tiananmen Square on June 4th. The cable was from the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. It confirmed no violence occurred and that protesters freely came and left the square. Only the Telegraph has reported on the cable. WikiLeaks, no bloodshed inside Tiananmen Square, cables claim, by Malcolm Moore. Propaganda is vital to color revolutions. We hear of Tank Man, but not that his actions occurred the day after June 4th, or that he left the scene unscathed, without any violence from Chinese authorities. This is confirmed in video of the incident. Oh, am I going to get that video? Am I going to get that video? No. Wah, 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 wah. Can't win them all. Tank Man propaganda conceals images such as these. The truth is no major clashes between peaceful protesters and authorities occurred. The violence stemmed from rioters outside the square, and half the casualties were authorities facing down heavy arms. Since June 4th, 1989, China has accomplished major achievements: the elimination of extreme poverty, massive wage growth, the global leadership in high-tech, public infrastructure development, and renewable energy. But the West's pursuit of war and color revolution continues. The notification Haiphong received informed him that Twitter had locked his account for violating our rules against abuse and harassment, presumably in reference to a rule the platform put in place a year ago, which prohibits content that denies the mass murder or other mass casualty events took place where we can verify that the event occurred, and when content is shared with abusive intent. This may include references to such an event as hoax or claims that victims or survivors are fake or actors, Twitter said of the new rules. It includes, but is not limited to, events like the Holocaust, school shootings, terrorist attacks, and natural disasters. What we are now seeing this rule applied to protect narratives which support the geostrategic interests of the U.S. centralized empire is not in the least bit surprising. From Benjamin Norton. The U.S. government thought police at Twitter locked journalist Danny Haifang's account, threatening to suspend him because he's contradicting the Western propaganda narrative on Tiananmen, calling it abuse. There is only free speech for U.S. regime propagandists here. Haifang is far from the first to dispute the mainstream Western narrative about exactly what happened about Tiananmen Square in June of 1989, as the Soviet Union was crumbling and Washington's temporary Cold War alignment with Beijing was losing its strategic usefulness. But we can expect more acts of online censorship like this as Silicon Valley continues to expand into its role as guardian of imperial historic records. The idea that government-tied Silicon Valley institutions should act as arbiters of history on behalf of the public consumer is gaining steadily increasing acceptance in the artificially manufactured echo chamber of the mainstream public opinion. We saw another example of this recently in Joe Loria's excellent refutation of accusations against Consortium News of historic inaccuracy by the imperial narrative management firm NewsGuard. As journalists like Whitney Webb and Minar Adley noted years ago, NewsGuard markets itself as a news ratings agency, designed to help people sort out good from bad sources of information online, but in reality functions as an empire-backed weapon against media who question imperial narratives about what's happening in the world. The Gray Zone's Max Blumenthal outlined the company's many partnerships with imperial swamp monsters like former NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen and chief propagandist Richard Stengel, as well as imperialist cutouts like German Marshall Fund, when its operatives contacted his outlet for comment on their accusations. Loria compiles a mountain of evidence in refutation of the NewsGuard's claim that Consortium News published false content about the 2014 US-backed coup in Ukraine, copiously citing outlets which NewsGuard itself has labeled accurate sources of information with its green check designation system. It becomes clear, as you read the article, that NewsGuard's real function is, as John Kiriakou put it, guarding the country from the news. Then you've got Wikipedia, which blacklists the same sites as NewsGuard and whose operatives run relentless smear campaigns on anti-imperialist voices, thereby guaranteeing a view of history that is widely tilted in the favor of empire-authorized narratives. Jimmy Wales, the co-founder of Wikipedia, also happens to serve on NewsGuard's advisory board. This idea that anyone can ever be an imperial arbiter of objective reality is logically fallacious and is invalidated by facts in evidence. It is clear that imposing regulations on people's efforts to understand world events on the platforms where people have come to congregate to share ideas and information will necessarily lead to an information ecosystem that is skewed to the benefit of whatever power structure is imposing those regulations. When that power structure is an alliance of oligarchs and government proxies whose interests are served by the ongoing dominance of the U.S. centralized empire, the information ecosystem will be biased in favor of the empire. The most impressive feat of engineering in the 21st century has been of the social variety. The social engineering necessary to continuously keep people confused and blinkered about what's going on in the world despite a sudden influx of information availability is one of the most astonishing achievements in the history of civilization, despite its depraved and destructive nature. The empire has had mixed feelings about the internet since its creation. On one hand, it allows for unprecedented surveillance and information gathering and the rapid distribution of propaganda, which it likes. But on the other, it allows for the unprecedented democratization of information, which it doesn't like. Its answer to this quandary has been to come up with fact-checking services and Silicon Valley censorship protocols for restricting misinformation with facts and information defined as whatever advances imperial interests. That's all we're seeing with continually expanding online censorship policies and with government-tied oligarchic narratives, management operations like NewsGuard. Once again, Caitlin Johnstone, laying it out, just crushing it. Just crushing it, right? Just crushing it. Yeah, they can say you don't count if they don't like what we say, yeah. Well, but even more than that, like, this is the thing, this is how they're skirting the charter, right? Is that they're saying, oh, you can speak, like, you can talk all you want, get your following as you want, but you're not considered Canadian content. And the arrangement that they'll have with private industry, right, even though there's been a clear merger, will be, oh, you're only going to platform Canadian content. And this isn't Canadian content. Right? So this is a skirting of the charter, which I don't think passes charter muster. I think the people should challenge it and probably would win, but it doesn't mean that it's not them trying to do it. It should be pointed out that this color revolution was the first time China had to deal with such a situation. Yeah, at this time they didn't have specialized riot units and the appropriate equipments. Yeah, exactly. There's that too, Ligandis. Like, and near as I can tell from what I've read, this isn't the first time I've encountered this this idea that the Tiananmen Square massacre is false. But near as I can tell when I look at it, I'm just like, yeah, I feel like China did a really good job of dealing with a very tense situation, and really kind of gives lie to the idea that, like, China's an authoritarian place where you can't even protest or they massacre you. It's like, what are you talking about? There was an obvious protest. It was obviously peaceful, right? Sure, there were, like, conflicts where people died, but guess what? Like, you think nobody died during Occupy? You think nobody died during Black Lives Matter? Like, you think nobody, like, what are you talking about? Right? That's the nature of protests. That's the nature of these things. And there's plenty of evidence to show that there's Western influence in color revolution. And of course they want to try to do a color revolution. Like, that's what the United States has been doing for decades and decades. If not a fucking century. Listening to commie propaganda on Comedy Time. That's goddamn right, content. It's goddamn right. You better turn around and do something useful with your capitalist existence, right? That's what I do. Anytime I'm mopping the floor, taking out the garbage, doing any of that kind of stuff, what do you think I'm listening to, right? I'm listening to commie propaganda. Good for you, bud. Glad you're here. Glad you're here. Biden wants China to invade Taiwan. More money for the military-industrial complex. China will never invade Taiwan. This is what's going to happen. I love talking about this because it's so clear to me that this is what China wants to see, right? Because this conflict that's been going on between Taiwan and China has been going on for a long, long time, like since Mao, for sure. But why do you think they're building all these nuclear submarines here? Like, why do you think they're trying to get, like, more ships in this region, right? It's because what they don't want is what China wants, which is China wants to create a blockade around Taiwan. Right? It wants to get its boats just surrounding Taiwan, right? 100%. Just make it so the Americans can't get in, they can't do runs through, right? You create a blockade, right? And then you just shoot a vessel from the harbor, right? Just boink, doink, send it right into Taipei, right? Go right to the National Palace Museum, right? Like, go right to the palace, the cultural center, right? Meet the leadership of Taiwan there. The leadership from, or the ambassadors, because, you know, like Xi Jinping and these guys, and it's not even going to be Xi Jinping, we're talking about like 50, 60 years, because that's how China thinks. They're going to send a delegation, and they're going to end up there, and they're going to peacefully enter the city, and they're going to say to the Taiwan leadership, here we are, in the province of Taiwan, in the glorious country of China. And the Taiwanese leadership is going to go, we welcome you to the province of Taiwan here in the glorious country of China. And then they'll sign a little document that says that that's the case, and that'll be the end of it, right? That the conflict will be resolved. That's what China wants, right? Taiwan has a different view. I think Taiwan's pretty happy with how things are, right? I think like Taiwan doesn't want to go American and Taiwan doesn't want to go Chinese. I think Taiwan is pretty happy being Taiwan. But unfortunately, when you've got a large global power struggle existing, right? It doesn't work that way. And if China has a brain in their head, they'll get in there, they'll get that document signed, and then they'll basically leave Taiwan alone, right? Because the only thing that China's really afraid of is Taiwan breaking and going American. And if Taiwan were to do that, it has to invade. It has to. Unless you've got a nail in your head and you're being there, well, that's totally fine that they put a military base in Taiwan. Unless you're like that, yeah, they have to invade Taiwan if Taiwan starts breaking and going American, letting American troops, letting an American military base, if this starts to Americanize, they have to invade it. It's just, they have to. Given what America's stated goal is towards China, which is to go to war with it. It's been very open about it. It's not a secret. And but what China wants to see is it just wants to see a peaceful, diplomatic, just stick the landing, right? Now, from the Chinese perspective, it is like this whole thing is like a gymnastics routine, right? That they're going through a gymnastics routine right now, and they want to stick the landing, and sticking the landing is just having a document signed. Yep, I'm just a Chinese paid bot. Certainly not a gentleman who has a view of history. Certainly not a gentleman who tries to create an accurate representation of what's serious in the world. I must be a Chinese paid robot. I gotta tell you guys, if I was a Chinese paid robot, I think I'd be way happier. Any Chinese government officials who are most definitely listening to this, hit me up. I could do this for money. I'll get paid by you guys. Sure. You guys seem to be doing okay. I don't care. Pay me. That please make it so that I don't need to go to capitalism anymore. Although I don't want to shit on my cafe job. I gotta tell you guys, this cafe job has turned into something really beautiful in a way. Recently, they moved away from the tipping model. They just raised their prices, and now my pay is directly tied to sales, along with my wage, of course. But it's increased the amount of pay I get. It's made it more consistent, and it also makes me feel more invested in the endeavor. And it feels like a kind of socialist transition in a kind of a way. The people are really good, right? The people are really excellent, right? So I'm pretty happy with what's going on. And Kay, did you hear about the Socialist Cafe on Jarvis? I have. I keep seeing it, and I keep forgetting to leave it. I keep forgetting to leave the link because there's a video that's going around about this place. Unionize your workplace. Yeah. I don't know how successful a unionization effort would be for this workplace. Also, I feel because it's not like Starbucks, right? I feel like our owners, it's not corporate. First of all, the people that own the place, work there. I know them, and then on top of that, it's obvious that they're the response that I have gotten, because I'm asking, I'm not saying no, but what I get is why? What would our demands be? What could we get even? And it's yeah, the owners are pretty happy, the staff is pretty happy with how the owners are operating the place. I'm pretty happy, honestly, with how the owners are operating the place. So we would only be unionizing on principle, and I don't think that that's worth the fight. You know what I mean? Why fight if you don't have to? Frankly, I'm more or less of the opinion that if I were to do that fight right now, it would be just to get the workers to take the place over completely. And that's a much more serious conversation. Now you're talking about taking out bank loans. Now you're talking about something much, much more serious, which I don't think the staff is ready for as well. So you can only unionize if people want to, right? And in principle, I'm sitting here going like, yeah, we should unionize, but I'm one voice. Fun fact, Caitlin went from following me to blocking me in a matter of a month or so. Apparently, she didn't like me calling her a hypocrite. Oh, Adam, why are you calling Caitlin Johnstone a hypocrite? Why? Why even do it? Why even do it? What did she do? What's the thing that she did that got your ire up? And anyone else feel weird when people associate democratizing information on the side of good and desirable? I don't think I understand that. Like, information should be out there and should be available, right? Like, the weakness, and ostensibly the information is out there, right? It just takes a lot of effort to, like, that's the thing, that's what I'm doing right now. It takes a lot of effort to sift through it and create a larger meta picture, right? Like, that's sort of the trick, is that there's a lot of information and it's dispensed, but there's very few people who are even paid in the first place to sift through and create a more meta narrative, and those people operate on behalf of the empire. And so there's even less people, hello, how you doing, hi, sifting through it, creating an anti-imperialist narrative, who understand what's happening in a negative sort of a sense. So, but I'm more or less a fan of the idea of democratizing information. It's the trouble is that there are still gatekeepers. Like, you can democratize all the information you want, but the people who are paid to sift through that information and make sense of it, because there's so fucking much of it, work for the empire. Like, that's all. So, to me, the issue isn't the democratization of information. It's who are the gatekeepers? Who are the people who are actually sifting through the information and creating meta-narratives? I know that the U.S. has been dominant in their propaganda since World War II with the establishment of the Cold War and NATO. Yeah, absolutely. They're literally calling everyone who isn't touting the Western narrative a bot. How cartoonish can you get? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Socialist Anarchist Cafe, yeah. I love that it's happening, man. I love that it's happening. Seems like these sorts of things go in waves. Seems like they go in waves. Unionization wouldn't work in your workplace. Stay strong, comrade. Don't let the bourgeoisie keep you down. I mean, it's another, like, I don't work for a corporation. Like, I don't work for a faceless asshole who I've never met and couldn't find the place on the map. The people who own the place work in the establishment, right? Like, I know who they are. I see them all the time, right? And that is different in my view. Like, theoretically, like, in terms of the Marxian theory, it does make them like petty bourgeoisie, right? Like, they are the owner operators, right? And with the goal being that eventually they'll cease working in the place and just make the benefits and all that kind of stuff. But that transition has not occurred, right? And near as I can tell, the transition is actually going in the other direction. That I really do think that if this place that I'm working at now were to suddenly start saying, hey, why don't we make this worker run? Like, why don't we make it so the workers actually own the workplace? Because one of the owners is getting pretty old, right? Getting into that kind of retirement age, probably looking to sell. And if he's looking to sell, perhaps the workers could look at him and be like, hey, we could buy this and, like, turn it into a worker-owned establishment. We'll see how that all goes, but it's... but again, I am one voice of many, and I think especially right now, as the owners are doing everything they can to make sure that the staff is happy. And believe me, guys, like, they feed us. Like, I can take as much food from this establishment as I want, right? They feed us. They give us drinks at the end of the night. The wage is good in the first place, and then on top of it, there's this I'd be blown away if I could find a better treatment at any cafe, right? Like, the place I'm working now is amongst the best places I've ever worked. And so the idea that I'm going to go around and be successful with a unionization drive at this moment, when most of the staff's opinion is basically like, what are you talking about? And I get it. Like, if you're being treated well, right? If you're being treated well, you know? And it's not like you could just, like, find a better place. Like, I don't think you could. Like, I really don't. So, it's still capitalism, though. I'm ostensibly opposed to it, but, you know, I'll take the smiling face if I can get it. So you think they will enter Taiwan, maybe like the transfer of sovereignty over Macau or Hong Kong, a handover? Yeah, that's what China wants. China doesn't want to blow the place up. China doesn't want a war, right? They don't want that kind of shit. They're not interested in it. They want to just be recognized. That's all. They just want it to be recognized. Caitlin started it. She called people chumps for taking the virus seriously and refused to apologize when she was proven wrong. Then she continued to call out people for having bad manners. Yeah, okay. Like, this is why I was, like, I am always delicate when dealing with the virus issue, right? I've always been that way with it. I've never taken a strong position. My only position during the virus was, what are the workers, what are the nurses and the doctors saying? That's been my only position. That's the only flag I'll plant, and the only flag the hill I die on is, what are the nurses and doctors saying? That's it. Because I think if you're not listening to the nurses and doctors, then you're not actually serious. Just straight across the board. Like, those are the workers. Those are the people who are really dealing with it for real. All your meta politics and all your your larger sort of stuff does not matter even close to as much as what the nurses and the doctors think. And that's the hill I die on. But I can see, and Caitlin's probably one of these, and there's a whole bunch of people who, like, take a hard position, right, and then they double down on it, and if they're proven wrong, then they grind their heels. Like someone like Jimmy Dore. Jimmy Dore's like this, so is Max Blumenthal. And I respect both of those guys. Right, that when it comes to the virus, they've taken a hard position, right? And I just don't think it's wise to take a hard position on an extremely complex issue. So, and the smarter thing to have done during this virus period was to accept facts as you see them, listen to people who have strong opinions, like don't censor people, right? Because there's always little iotas of truth all over, right? Like, I think the most controversial position that I espoused during this virus period is, look, the anti-vaxxers have a point. Like, oh, you're telling me that like there's this big pharma that we're never supposed to trust. We've been shitting on them for decades. They're evil. We all know they're evil. And our government, we don't trust our government at all. It's this, like, big looming evil organization. These two forces have merged, and now they're standing in front of us saying, put this in your body, everything will be fine. Yeah, no. I'm just like, yeah, I get it. Like, I don't agree. I at the end of the day, I don't defer to those forces. I defer to the nurses, the nurses and the doctors. The nurses and the doctors. But I get it. Like, I don't think that it's crazy or kooky or weird or strange to believe, I'm not going to inject myself with something given to me by these obviously evil, dark forces that exist in the world. Like, nah, okay. But, again, like, yeah, you and your fellow workers haven't seized the means of production. No, it's absolutely like a social democracy situation, Adam. You're completely fucking right. That, like, the capitalists see what's going on in the world. They're like, oh no, the workers are going to revolt against us and overthrow us and seize the means of production. We better create a series of concessions to improve the quality of life around here to ensure that they don't revolt against us. And I got to tell you, it worked. Straight up, it worked. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, it worked. That's the thing. That's the reason why what I think is happening in the United States is so insane. Because capitalists conceding power to the working class works. Giving the working class concessions works. It is how you prevent a disgruntled populace from overthrowing you. Right? I even think about the absurdity of what it is to be in the Liberal Party federally right now. Like, the Conservatives are going to overthrow them, and they're basically going to get overthrown while doing nothing to prevent it whatsoever. Like, that's what's so blisteringly odd about the current Liberals, right? And the entire United States apparatus. Like, if the Biden administration had have come in and been like, we're going to do this and do that, we're going to help people, increase education, do all this kind of stuff, people, I think, would have been like, oh, yeah, okay. Things are happening. Okay. But we can't even get that done, right? That's how dark and evil the system of capital is that it refuses to actually begin providing any of these concessions, which work. They completely work until they're threatened existentially. So until the system of capital is outright threatened, and how do we threaten the existing system of capital? Surrounding the halls of power. What have I always been saying? Hey Isaac, how you doing, bud? Is any of your audiobooks available on Amazon Audible? Yeah, you should be able to find them. Just look me up. John Sanderson. Jon Sanderson. I have sold 156 copies. Yeah. Feels good. Some of them are better than others. I won't say which, because I don't think that that's polite. But some of them are better than others. More than 1 in 5 of the UK population are in poverty. Yeah, 14.5 million people, while Boris is concerned about Ukraine. Yeah, well, and this is starting to blow up on Boris. There's a huge crisis going on within the Conservative Party in England right now. They're talking about getting rid of Boris, and so Boris is having to scramble and consolidate power to try and maintain his own position within the Conservative Party, because exactly the thing you're saying, like, there is a popular movement that is rising. Like, you got to think about it, man. Like the Brits actually did vote for Brexit. Like, they actually did do that, right? Everybody went to the ballot box and went, yeah, fuck the EU, right? That takes a spirit of rebellion. That takes a spirit of revolt, right? If I'm the Conservatives right now, and I got these numbers kind of coming in with the poverty, the attempt to privatize the NHS, like this kind of shit, like, the only thing that's protecting the Conservatives right now is the Labour Party, right? But now everybody knows, because of what's going on with Jeremy Corbyn, because of all the drama and the politics surrounding Jeremy Corbyn, everybody knows that fucking party is bought, right? So there's this, like, upswell of energy happening in Britain where even the conservative types are starting to be like, oh, we got to do something about this. And so the response is to get rid of the face of their party and put another face on it. So it's got, and this has interesting reverberations, because now the UK is not paying attention to Ukraine anymore, right? The recent polling in the United States and throughout Europe showed that majorities of citizens would be fine, would accept a negotiated deal, right? Something like 53 to 55% of the populaces are saying, like, just negotiate a deal, like, get to the table, which has Biden actually saying in op-eds that we should do a negotiated deal. There is a really interesting thing going on. Come on. Yeah. Was it this? No, this is another thing. This is another thing. I am so organized. I'm so super organized. You guys tune in here because you like to see how organized I definitely am. I'm so organized. Okay. Zelensky has said recently that Russia is aiming to take the city of Zaporizhzhia, right? This would actually be an incredibly crucial shift, because right now the Russian fighting, right, happening in this region, right, all this kind of stuff. If they take this city, this is an enormous cutoff point. Like, look at the strategic importance of this city, right? the river basically cuts Ukraine in two, right? The river cuts Ukraine in two. Russia gains control of this. Goodbye any kind of hope, getting any kind of troops, anything through this corridor. It essentially means the battlefront is here and that they're just going to push forward. And they already have been at Kiev once before, right? What makes anybody think that they're going to stop? So all of the cards, as the cards are being played, the more and more it's looking like the populace wants a negotiated settlement. Even the Biden administration is talking about a negotiated settlement. The Russians are gaining territory. They're gaining ground as the thing goes on. The $40 billion that Biden spent has not gone to Ukraine. It went to weapons contractors who basically said, yeah, we're just going to keep that money, right? Because that's what fucking psychopaths do, right? The small amount of arms that they've sent. It's been pointed out that we sent some heavy artillery to Ukraine, but we didn't send the ammunition, right? We sent like 1,000 bullets with this heavy artillery. It's like 1,000 bullets. We use that in an hour. Right? The Russian military uses that kind of ammunition in an hour of warfare. Like, so they're running out of ammo. They don't have the ability to fight back. The Russians, as far as I'm concerned, the Russians won this thing. Right? They've already seized the territory of Donbass. Right? So now it's just whether or not, and crucially, and this is very crucial, the Nazi troops have been defeated. Right? That yes, there's military, yes, they're fighting, but the Nazis themselves have been defeated, right? And the Nazi element was the element that wasn't cooperating with anybody, right? Because the Nazis knew that there was no end game for them except eradication on either side. Like, that's the Nazis. They knew that was the case. And now it's happened, right? And so now we're heading towards trials where the Russians are going to put these Nazis on trial, right, and tell the world about the many massacres that occurred and all of this kind of stuff. And now you're starting to see the international community basically be like, come on, guys, like, it's time to negotiate a settlement. It's time to get to the table. And I expect to see that, right, because it's what Russia wants. It's what Russia wants. It's what the international community is steadily coming to terms with, and it's what the Ukrainian people want. Right? Yeah, exactly, Compton, right? Like, get fucked. Like, get fucked. Australia and Canada need to stay away from Chinese airspace. Oh, yeah, dude. I love it, eh? I saw that article, too. Did I keep that article? Did I keep it? Again, so organized. Super organized. I saw that article, though. I know what you're talking about. Like, oh, hey, here was that article I was just talking about. Remember what I was saying, how organized I was? Well, there's the article. Anyway. Yeah, Dmitry Lascaris isn't running for the Green Party leadership, man. I'm so disappointed. But, yeah, like, we're flying planes around Chinese airspace, and then the Chinese like fly planes near our planes that were flying near their airspace, and then we're all like, the Chinese are bullying us, and I'm like, shut up, like, that's so, like, come on, little baby brains, like, what do you think? Like, Canada is here, China is here, like, what the fuck are you doing? Yeah, Isaac, it's crazy. The energy prices are so bad, families are taking their kids to McDonald's to stay warm and cool. Yeah, dude, fucking brutal, eh? Like, the whole thing is coming apart at the seams and nobody gives a shit at all, right? Like, here's a great example of what I'm talking about. Like, I have talked about on several occasions my deep concern about the usage of the MAID system, right? Well, here's it showing up on fucking Tucker Carlson.
Are we overstating what's happening here?
No, and first of all, thank you so much for covering it, Tucker, because it doesn't get a lot of coverage. And I think I have to wonder why. I mean, violence is something we hear covered ad nauseum. Everything today is violence, even things which obviously aren't violent.
Yes.
This is violence. This is medicalized violence. Why isn't this being covered? Why aren't we talking about it? Especially when it's poor people, especially when it's working class people who are structurally pushed into that. I think that's a question worth asking.
Well, sure, and there's this very difficult problem, which is what do you do when an economy based on finance starts to go south and average people, can't kind of sustain themselves? Do you do guaranteed basic income or whatever? This seems like an obvious choice for ghouls, neoliberal ghouls. Like we'll just force poor people to kill themselves.
And how many times have we heard from Canada about their healthcare system, their social care system, talking down to us about so many things? And now it's come home to roost. Canada's policies are seen for what they are. And Canada has their own problems. We need to learn from this. We need to say,
right,
look, what's happening to our poor people, to our disabled people? The dementia population, Tucker, which we talked about the early part of the pandemic, is set to double in the next 20 years. It's going to triple in the next 30 years. What are we going to do? Are we going to put the resources into care for them? If we don't, I really only see two options, so-called robot care or straight up no chaser euthanasia.
Yeah. So why don't politicians just say out loud now? I mean, so many things we're seeing now we couldn't have imagined 10 years ago, 5 years ago even, and now they're commonplace.
That's right.
Killing yourself is not liberation. It's really sad. You shouldn't be forced to do it. Like, why does nobody say that?
Well, your show is an example of giving people a voice who have no voice. The people who are most dramatically impacted by this, the working class and the poor, don't have a voice. And so we need to decide. And it's so interesting to see the political realignment underway. Which party is going to be the voice of the working class, the working, and of the poor, to be on the side of people who say, I don't want to die. I don't want to die, but I don't see any option given what's been offered me. That's just diabolical.
Like what we're seeing in America, and it's fascinating to watch, right? And he just said it right there, right? It's a political reconfiguring, right? A configuration. There's steadily becoming a rejection of neoliberalism, right? I shouldn't say steadily. Neoliberalism has been rejected by the populace. The Ontario election really proves it, in my view. Like literally 57% of the electorate just staying home because all of the leaders are neoliberal and they know it. No point to vote for this. And what you're seeing is that because compassionate voices have nowhere else to go, well, who's picking them up? The grifters, right? And who are the grifters in this conversation? That would be the Republicans and the conservatives, right? So the conservatives and the Republicans are placing themselves as the compassionate option, right? That they are going to pick up on things like this. They are going to talk about these sorts of issues, right? These issues of helping the poor, helping the needy, even though they have no intention of doing any of these sorts of things. But it's going to be very persuasive. It's already being very persuasive, right? So we are heading towards like federally conservative rule for sure, and most definitely in the United States, we're going to see a Donald Trump Republican Party. Like I just don't see, unless something miraculous happens, like unless Jesus Christ himself ascends from heaven, being like, hey guys, yo bros, it's time, let's end times this bitch, right? Unless that actually happens, I think that's basically what we're going to see. By the way, all my hot commie takes today were given me to my wife. Good stuff. Common law, of course. How much of those weapons that were supposedly for Ukraine ended up on the black market? Yeah, there's that too, right? There's that too. Like the whole thing, like Ukraine is one of the most corrupt nations on the planet. Oh, I posted a video of China's response to Canada in their aerospace in the Discord. Brilliant. No, okay. So this is for those who are just listening, I'll just read this. Canadian military aircraft have recently increased close-in reconnaissance and made provocations to the Chinese side in the name of implementing UN Security Council resolutions. This is a dangerous act against China's national security and the safety of Chinese and Canadian frontline personnel. China firmly opposes this. In response to the Canadian side's provocative acts and unfriendly and unprofessional maneuvers, the Chinese military promptly took legitimate and forceful measures in response that are safe and professional. China has also lodged serious démarches with the Canadian side through diplomatic channels. China urges Canada to seek the severity of the incident and refrain from taking any adventurous or provocative moves. Otherwise, all the grave consequences will be borne by the Canadian side. UN Security Council resolutions have never mandated any country to deploy forces and conduct surveillance operations in jurisdictional air and sea areas of other countries for the purpose of identifying sanction evasion activities. China firmly rejects all moves that endanger China's sovereignty and national security in the name of implementing resolutions. I also want to stress that sound and steady China-Canada relations meet the shared interests of the two sides and represent the common aspiration of the two peoples. Canada should respect objective facts, stop spreading disinformation, and have a clearer understanding of the situation. It should also adopt a prudent and practical China policy and work toward the recovery and normal development of China-Canada relations with real actions. Yep. Yeah, dude. Like, we shouldn't be provoking China. Like, I don't get why we want to. Like, that's the part of the conversation that gets really odd, right? Outside of this, like, I'm the biggest. Outside of just like an ape, just like hitting his chest and being like, Argh! I don't get why we would ever want to do this. Like, it's just so stupid. It's so backwards. It's so the opposite of what a rational person would think or do, right? Like, it just seems stupid to me. Have you seen the Times article talking about the Azov Battalion changed their symbol because of Russian propaganda? No, that sounds very stupid. The Times really showing how much they actually care. I want to see what becomes of the DPR and LPR. Yeah, I reckon global South countries will recognize them immediately, but all the white countries will be very reluctant to do so at first. Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, for goodness sakes, you take a look at the map, you can just see, like, this situation that happened in Georgia still hasn't been recognized. Like, you can see, like, the lines are still, like, dotted, right? So they still technically haven't recognized any of that. So it'll be a similar situation here, even though Russia will obviously have administrative power here and administrative control. It's the difference, I think, is that unlike what happened in Georgia, the Americans have really elevated Zelensky as a figure, right? Zelensky is the guy, right? Your average Canadian and American citizen knows who Zelensky is, if they care about this at all. Right? So if you're like a Stand With Ukraine stan, you know who Zelensky is, right? Which, that's very odd and unusual for Canadians and Americans, right? Canadians and Americans don't know who the leader of France is, or the leader of Spain. Like, the leader of Germany probably, they don't care, right? So the idea that they would know who the leader of Ukraine is during this period of time, Zelensky. Well, then you ask them, okay, who's the leader before Zelensky? They don't know. But what that means is that because Zelensky is the guy, if he signs a document, that's it, right? Like, the Americans can't say, oh, this is phony bullshit, if Zelensky signs it. So that's the reason why the Russians want Zelensky around. That's the reason why they want him alive, why they're not even attempting to do anything about him, because they know how important he is in international politics at this moment. So if they come to an agreement, Zelensky signs it, this will be recognized by the world community because they can't do anything else. Yeah, no, people still talk that Russia was the aggressor in Georgia. They'll still, the narrative, the Western narrative that Putin invaded Ukraine with no provocation whatsoever, like, for God's sakes, we just went over the Tiananmen Square massacre. How people are still talking about how that massacre occurred when nothing of the sort occurred, right? Like, this narrative is going to last people's lifetimes, right? There's just going to be people who go to the grave believing that Russia was the aggressor here, right? It's just how it's going to be. That's why it's so dangerous. They didn't even post any pics or vids of the Chinese planes. Maybe they're not allowed phones on Canadian Navy ships. Yeah, I'm glad Tucker covered this. You know what? And this is what I keep saying over and over again, right? Like, things are fucking wacky and complex. And I don't agree with Tucker Carlson. I think that Tucker Carlson's a white supremacist, right? Like, I think that he's fine to, like, the white replacement theory, all that kind of crazy shit. But at the same time, a story like that doesn't get any play elsewhere, right? There are lots of and it does kind of, it lends, like, if you're a Republican voter, you're like, well, the Democrats aren't doing anything about this. They don't seem to care at all. So, yeah, it's a blip of info, yeah. Did it sound favorable towards single-payer healthcare systems? Oh, that's an interesting point too, Compton. Yeah, no, that is a fair point. That they could use this as an argument of, like, the problem is government. Look what the government did. It could flow into that whole Reaganite ideology of just privatize it. This kind of thing would never happen in a privatized system, right? Forgetting, of course, that, like, the reason why things are getting bad enough so that people want to commit suicide in the first place is that we are steadily privatizing our single-payer healthcare system, right? That's why it's in decline, you know. But I take that point. That's a strong point, I think, Content. Kaya, the Pissed Off Canadian, check out the article I put in the articles in Discord. You got it. What'd you do? What did you do? Oh, yes, I saw this. BC man among the first Canadians approved for COVID-19 vaccine injury payout. Ross Whitman, one of 10 people hospitalized with Guillain-Barré syndrome within 30 days of vaccine. In the year since he became partially paralyzed, Ross Whitman has kept his focus on small victories, from getting up the stairs unassisted to going for a solo walk near his rural BC home. But the biggest win came in the form of an email from Canada's Vaccine Injury Support Program that confirmed something he said he knew all along, that his condition was likely caused by the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine. That was quite vindicating, Whiteman said from his Lake Country home in the Okanagan Valley. To have it in hand, in paper, acknowledging it, has been vindicating. Whiteman was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome, a rare condition that affects the nervous system, just days after his first and only dose of the vaccine. The condition can cause paralysis, muscle weakness, and even death. Every day is a grind, says Whiteman, who still has substantially limited mobility in his arms and legs. The letter doesn't change my condition, or the way I feel overly, it's just nice to have. GBS diagnoses following a COVID-19 vaccination are extremely rare, about 1 in 700,000, according to data from the BC Centre for Disease Control and Health Canada. There have been 10 reports of individuals hospitalized with GBS within 30 days of a COVID-19 vaccine since December 2020, all of whom have been discharged, according to the BCCDC. 4 reports following the AstraZeneca vaccine, 5 following Pfizer, BioNTech, Comirnaty, and 1 followed Moderna Spikevax. More than 11.7 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine have been administered in BC, with health experts noting the risks associated with coronavirus infection far outweigh the risks of vaccination. There have been more than 41,000 deaths associated with COVID-19 in Canada. This is a good article. I like that this article exists that admits, I'm not going to read the whole thing because I think you guys get the gist. This really flows into what I think is my larger kind of point in regards to the COVID conversation, right? From the anti-vaxxers and the pro-vaxxers and all this kind of stuff. Like, I wish we weren't being so tribal and hard-lined in the way that we talk about these things, right? Like when penicillin came in, like when we rolled penicillin through, right? Penicillin eradicated a bunch of shit. Penicillin dealt with a ton of shit. It also killed a bunch of people, right? There were lots of people who were just like not down with penicillin as a thing, and it caused all kinds of problems. And part of the issue of what I think is going on is that we're not actually being completely honest on both sides of the conversation. Like, yeah, we should have absolutely, and of course, in retrospect, people will say that they were like this. But absolutely, like, if the anti-vaxxers are saying, like, oh, I'm worried that there's going to be a health complication for me or something like this, like, there are. There aren't a lot. Like, 10 people. like 10 people, right? Like, that's not a lot, but it's not nothing. It's not zero. And I feel like the conversation that we've been having in regards to COVID has been overly combative when it doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be combative like this, right? But the issue, of course, is that everybody's taking it very personally, which makes sense, given that it's an issue of people's mortality, right? This is a mortality issue, and so everyone's like as high up as they can possibly be about it, and it makes sense. It makes all the sense in the world. And so all we can say is just be kind to one another, accept what one another think about the situation, especially as we're fading away. Like, the pandemic's fading away now, right? Like, sure, COVID's around, just like the flu is around, right? All of that stuff's true. Wear your mask, wash your hands, do all that kind of stuff. Listen to your doctors, listen to your nurses. But I think we really, especially for the people who are really entrenched in the vaccination position, I think now is the time for us to kind of take a step down and to just listen. Like, we've got to come together as a community again, and accept that. And honestly, guys, we've got to accept that it was a very emotional period. A very emotional period. And when people are emotional, they do and say stupid fucking shit. You think that every single one of those guys that threw a tantrum in a Walmart is sitting there being like, yeah, that was the right thing to do? Probably not. Like, I think that what we experienced, Major's very on point with this, right? People were very afraid. There was a lot of fear-mongering that happened. But not just fear-mongering. There was just a general sense of fear. We didn't know what it was. The phrase pandemic was very scary for me. Like, I'll speak for myself. I found the situation to be very scary. I knew, like, I was working for a corporate toy store. I knew exactly how these guys were going to respond to this, which was barely, right? Like, the spirit of, yeah, our corporate owners are fine with letting us die. Like, that definitely took hold. It definitely shifted people's perceptions. There was a lot of uncertainty. It was tumultuous and highly emotional. And I think that we all need to just simply, like, even if we don't accept what those people did, I think we need to get to a place where we accept that they weren't in their, it's not their best look, right? And that there's a reason for it. And that reason is that we're highly emotional creatures swept up in a highly emotional time. And I just think that we need to forgive one another. I think that's really all it comes down to, you know, is that we need to look at one another and be like, okay. Like, and you don't need to say it to anybody, right? You don't need to say, like, hey, I forgive you, because that might piss them off, right? But just release yourself from that grudge. Release yourself from that burden that you're carrying around. Just accept for what it is, and release yourself, because I think these sorts of things fester, and really only hurt yourself in the end. So I think that's and I think that's true on all sides of the equation. That I hope we can kind of come back to the middle of it and be like, man, what a crazy time that COVID period was, eh? And there's still going to be those guys that are be like, oh yeah, those blah, blah, blah. And those guys are living in their own place, and we don't need to play into it, right? We can forgive and move forward. And hope that the next time the pandemic happens, we're more responsive, and use this as a learning opportunity for us. People still talk that Russia was the aggressor in Georgia. Yeah, you can even argue that people to this day say the Holodomor was a genocide. Well, it's especially true in Canada. Huge Ukrainian population in the Liberal Party, right? And the Holodomor being a genocide is super crucial for them. It's. I mean, for God's sakes, the liberal government is funding a anti-communist like memorial, right? So, Mexican president calls America's blockade on Cuba a genocide. Interesting move. Interesting move. Would it? I don't know how deep down the rabbit hole I want to go on that one. Simply the fact that he's calling it that is interesting, right? Kind of shows the sort of waning power of America in the first place, that the Mexican president doesn't feel afraid to say such a thing of America. And like, the sanctions on Cuba are so fucking stupid. Like, just so fucking dumb. More like Holgram my door. Come on, bud. Come on. Yeah, I'm with you on this, Major, right? The fear. But at the same time, like, I think we've got to come to that place of forgiveness that I was talking about, which is that they were scared too. I think that's the most important part, right? I think about like Trudeau, and I think about Freeland, and I think about the doctors and all of these people. I think about Doug Ford, right? They were scared too. And I think that's the real truth of it, you know? Like, I'm highly critical of these guys. You guys know me, right? I'm very critical of these guys. I don't think they're doing enough for Canadians. I think that they could do better. They should be confronting capital, all of those kinds of stuff. But they're still people. And I think that when the pandemic started and when the populace started to move in the way that it was moving and the fear kind of took hold, they were scared too, right? Doug Ford probably acted the most rationally he ever has by saying, what are the experts saying? Let's do what the experts say. Trudeau was so afraid that he passed a basic income that he promptly dismantled. It wasn't that they were a domineering, overwhelming overmind being like, let's use this moment to control the populace with fear and we'll spread it throughout the land. They were scared too. For sure. For sure. And in a way, I really wish they would all come out and just say that that was the case. Because now I feel like there's a lot of people who are shitting on the Trudeau administration and are shitting on the Liberals and the and everybody for their response to COVID. And I really wish that they would come out and be like, guys, like, we were all scared. We did our best with what was in front of us. We tried to follow the evidence as best we could. But I just wish they'd admit it, you know. But they're not going to, because that's not how they roll, right? Like Trudeau's a prince. He's got to live on in a kind of princely sort of way where he needs to exist above it. He needs to remain aloof. Is his kind of brand and his goal. But that's definitely not how he acted, and it's definitely not what we saw. What I saw was scared people acting out of fear, and I think it was understandable. I don't hold a grudge to anybody during this period of time, because even our own leadership, even the Trudeaus and the Fords and all those guys, because I wouldn't wish that moment on my worst enemy. Like, you have to guide a province or a country through a global pandemic. Boof. 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 Yeah, no one really knew what they were doing with this pandemic. They were just flying by the seat of their pants, but acting like they totally knew what they were doing. Yes, that's right. And if we want to be critical, if we want to actually have a critical eye, then that criticism needs to be levied at the system of capital itself, right? Because that was the most annoying part, that their insistence on acting like they knew what they were doing. Yeah, because it's a cover, right? It's just a cover so that we don't actually criticize the system of capital itself, right? Because what was the problem during the pandemic, really, right? The problem during the pandemic is that we all knew that these guys were not acting exclusively in our best interests. We all knew that that within their decision-making pattern was this idea that, yeah, but these guys need to make a bunch of money, right? We all knew that was the case, right? That the system of capital is structured in such a way so that the idea of we've got to save as many lives, we've got to get this vaccine, and we've got to do all this kind of stuff is secondary to the idea of let's make these guys rich, And we all know that's the case. And if you want to be critical about our leadership and about our system during the period of time, then the criticism shouldn't be levied at the individual people, shouldn't be levied at the scared little monkeys as they make their scared little monkey decisions. It should be levied at the system of capital itself, because it's the system of capital that enforces itself onto these people, to make them consider the wealth of the billionaire class first. That's the real criticism, if you ask me. I blame them for having empty coffers and not PPE on hand. Again, it's the system of capital, right? They no longer deserve the benefit of the doubt from me anymore, but yes, attack the root. Because I am more or less of the opinion that anyone would have acted this way, given the system of capital. Like, unless you are explicitly there to dismantle the system of capital and confront the system of capital, anyone would have acted this way. Anyone. It wouldn't have mattered. Any political leader from any political party, the leader of the country would have acted in exactly the same way, right? Just from this position of fear, like maybe small differences here and there, but generally across the board, more people would have been, would a small group have gotten more vaccines quicker, or like all this kind of stuff. Like, these minor differences would have been completely irrelevant to the overwhelming massive fear that was coming out of all of the leaders and all of the populace, right? The pandemic was a period of fear, without a doubt, and it's created a system of hesitancy, right? Especially amongst the left. You ask yourself, why is it that it's these right-wing groups, the trucker convoy? Like, why are these guys going out? Like, where's the leftist protest movements? Where are the communists? Where are the socialists? Where are the fucking even NDP or progressives and social democrats and all these guys? Where are they? Why aren't we getting them into the streets? It's because everyone's still scared. And all of those groups generally respect science and evidence and facts. Well, who doesn't? The right? And so they're more willing to confront these things and more willing to get out there and more willing to do it. That's going to steadily fade away, but it's not going to fade away unless we address it, we understand it, we acknowledge it, and we forgive one another. I think that's important. And I really mean it. Forgive everybody. Forgive Trudeau. Forgive Ford. Like, that moment, this pandemic moment, like, I keep talking about how there's a lot of different vectors that exist in it. Well, certainly the looming vector over all of it was mortality. Was literally the skeleton in the black cloak with the fucking scythe just looking over the populace, swathing through. Certainly. And so I wouldn't wish that position on my worst enemy. And a man like Trudeau and Ford are not equipped to deal with it in the first place. So we shouldn't expect them to. I don't forgive Ford for seniors dying of dehydration and malnutrition. I mean, that's been put in place since the Harris administration, right? Like, now we're talking about the long-term care home system. Like, the long-term care home system is exactly what I'm talking about when we talk about critiquing the system of capital. Because my concern with all of this is that, and people do this, we hyper-focus on a figure like Doug Ford. And he's an easy figure to hyper-focus on, right? Or like Trump. Trump's another great one, right? But these guys are not actually the problem, right? Ford isn't actually the problem. Trump isn't actually the problem. The trouble is the system of capital itself. And until we get a political leadership that's even talking about out loud in front of everybody that we need to dismantle the system of capital, then we shouldn't support them. And I think that is part of what happened in this last election here in Ontario. Yeah, private schools getting the rapid tests. No, you're right. Like, Ford's a dick. Like, I'm not trying to say I love Ford. But and certainly as the pandemic wound down, and certainly as things went down, he revealed his true colors. Like the teachers in Ontario, they had one day before the end of their holidays to figure out what they were doing when Ford decided to shut schools for an extra week. Yeah, he gave them one day. But that's kind of case in point, right? Generation, like they're really just like they don't know what to do, and it was a very tough situation. Well, that's between you and your heart, okay? But at the end of the day, it's more a burden on you than it is on them. I have zero fear of monkeypox. Monkeypox is interesting. Wouldn't that be fun? If the next thing that came through was monkeypox? I hope the next thing that comes through has a really fun name. Like a really funny thing. You know, like I can't like dolphin herpes or something, right? I cannot see myself forgiving the anti-Asian racists. Well, I mean, that's a different thing. There's a difference between like a guy who's dealing with a pandemic in like an absurd situation and like straight up like anti-Asian racists, which is total fucking bullshit, man. Like what a fucking stupid, like, why would you ever hate anybody based on their skin color or any of this kind of stuff? It drives me crazy. It's just got to be the most exhausting thing. Like, how can a person actually maintain this? The school of hard knocks tends towards the right, and generally has less fear. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, Ward. Right? Right? You got knocked over. Stand up straight. You go on and you do it. Yeah. And also, you have less fear if you've basically got a mobile home called a truck that you can drive around in. Yeah, racist could be racist, pandemic or not, I think. Yeah, exactly. Speaking of Doug Ford, cuts followed by more cuts. Political expert weighs in on what's next for Doug Ford. Doug Ford and his progressive conservatives won a second straight majority government last week. The first order of business, the government will be to reintroduce the almost $200 billion budget that was tabled ahead of the election call. What else does he have in store? I think we're going to get cuts, followed by more cuts, said Nelson Wiseman, professor of political science at the University of Toronto, when asked what's next for the newly re-elected Ford government. It's something Wiseman believes will be brought on by a worsening fiscal situation. I think whichever party would have gotten in would have had challenged in the environment that we will have. I think whichever party would have gotten in would have been challenged in the environment we will have in the coming year. I'm not predicting a recession or depression or anything like that. I am. I am. But it's not going to be as good as it was, and there's already signs of that. You see it in the housing market. You see the interest rates going up. You see with people complaining what they're paying for gasoline. On Thursday night, Ford talked about running a more efficient government in his acceptance speech. The following day, Ontario's premier doubled down on that promise. There are better ways of delivering services more efficiently at lower costs to the oligarchs, not to the populace. And that's what we're going to do, Ford said. We're going to make sure we respect the taxpayers' money, not the lives of the poor or the disabled, and the money we can save go right into healthcare and go right into education, privatized healthcare and privatized education, right? That if you're rich, it doesn't matter if these things are privatized. You can still have access to them. If you're poor, you can get fucked. Higher officer for Doug Ford, Chris Cochran, associate professor of political science at the University of Toronto, said Ford's decisive win last week opened the door for him to run for higher office. If there's a conservative leader chosen that flames out in the next federal election, then I think it's possible that if he wanted to, Doug Ford would be an immediately competitive candidate for the conservative leadership, Cochran said. And frankly, he might even have appeal across the country and likely be a successful conservative candidate. Right? Prime Minister Doug Ford. Like, sometimes I genuinely do feel like God is mocking us. Yeah, that's more or less how I feel about it. If I had to like introduce the religious language into the conversation, right? Like, it really does feel like God is mocking us. Like, oh, you want to rule yourselves? You want to govern yourselves? Okay. Here's your leader. How you liking it? Like, the problem with Doug Ford is not his malicious cruelty and the malicious cruelty of his base. It's his flagrant incompetence. Like, he's deeply, deeply, deeply incompetent. Way more incompetent than any other conservative leader. Like, he's way more incompetent than Skippy is, than Polyev, right? He's so much worse than Harper, than O'Toole, Scheer, any of those guys. Like, Doug Ford, like, the trajectory of his life has been born to a rich political family, becomes a drug dealer, gets political power, becomes Prime Minister of Canada. Like, if we vote Doug Ford in as the Prime Minister of Canada, we are a fallen people. Like, we are a lost and fallen people who no one should take seriously. Like, no one should take Ontario seriously as a province at the moment. Like, we have no credibility whatsoever. We're electing this guy. And this is easily, hands down, it's not a debate, the worst premier who has ever ruled in Ontario. But by a wide margin. This is a guy who walks in to a place where systems are in place, there's prosperity being spread throughout the society, where there are objectives and goals that are actually being achieved, right, and dismantles them. That requires a deep, deep, deep cruelty and stupidity. There's no other argument that can be made, right? Like when he takes power, emissions were down 96%, right? 96% of the grid is renewable energy, right? He's increased emissions by 400% in his first term. There are literally power plants that are going to be decommissioned while he is in office, and there is no plan to replace them. Like, his deep, deep incompetence and stupidity is absolutely going to dismantle any kind of prestige or quality of life in this province. Like, get ready for it. Get used to it. Yeah, Doug Ford did not grow up through a school of hard knocks. Yeah, although he espouses one, right? That's his sort of fraudulent position, right? So he postures as if he's like this man of the people, bootstrapping, just stand up straight and all this. When he's like literally the king of handouts. Like, he's never worked a real job. He's a college dropout, right? He's just like a total loser. Like, this is the thing that's so funny about Doug Ford, is he's a complete loser. Like, the only thing that, the reason why people like him is that when they call his number, he answers the phone. And then he shows up and just shovels some shit into their potholes, and people are like, oh yeah, okay. But it's like the classic con man grift, right? Just smile, wave, kiss babies, doesn't matter. And then conservatives say he's doing a good job, he's just a centrist. Yeah, right. Like, yeah, and there won't be anything to cut. If Doug Ford was PM, I'm off to Mexico. Yeah, AMLO, here we go. I mean, like, you get the leader you deserve, frankly. You get the leader you deserve, right? And I am more or less of the opinion, like, I'm actually quite proud of the populace's rejection of the NDP and the Liberals here in Ontario. It's painful, and it is going to be painful, right? The way that it's going. But we have to destroy the system of capital, and the populace basically makes the statement, we are not going to tolerate the nice capital, right? If the choice now is between the nice capital versus the ruthless capital, give us the ruthless capital until you actually start shitting out people who are saying capitalism itself is the problem. Because that's the truth, right? So we are confronting the system of capital the only way we can, the only way that the system allows us to, which is by abandoning those who are saying nice capitalism will work. No. Purging the reformists, getting the reformists out of the conversation entirely by abandoning them. until they finally start saying, okay, we've got to do something about this system of capital. It's obviously a problem, right? So until we grow up, well, then we'll just be shitty. It's pretty straightforward. Never admit to a fault or a wrong. Never accept blame. Concentrate on one enemy at a time. Blame that enemy for everything that goes wrong. Take advantage of every opportunity. Go Wolves. Yeah. Still haven't seen my buck a beer yet. People will believe a big lie sooner than a little one, and if you repeat it frequently enough, people will sooner or later believe it. Goebbels. Yeah. Sound like any party we know? They all do it. They all do it, dude. Like, they all operate this way. Some of them better than others. But that's fundamentally what they do. I saw buck of beers, but they were only available around holidays. They were actually a little more than $1. And I knew people who actually had some of those buck of beers, and they were terrible. I've never spoke to anybody who was like, yeah, they were okay. Like, not even that. Like, they literally were like, yeah, they were fucking bad. Like, they were bad. Like, I wouldn't even spend $1 to have it. Let's see if he follows through on his promise to increase ODSP by 5%. Don't hold your breath. Don't hold your breath. I used to be a reformist, but then I learned history of how the labor movements. Yeah, exactly. Just pointing out how conservatives are fascist. Yeah, we say it all the time, comrade, but we never show how. It's true. I mean, Doug Ford himself has, like, he's tried to give the police, like, stop and frisk powers. Like, you know it's bad when the police literally, you try to give the police overwhelming fascist powers and they say, no thank you. Like, you know that you're fucking up when the police say no thank you to your overwhelming fascist powers. And, like, Doug Ford cuts everything except cops. Like, what do you need to see? Like, it's legit just leftover beer from the holiday stock of all the big beer companies. Oh yeah, that'd be a clever way to do it. I'd love to move to the DPRK. It's too far away for me. Yeah. Oh, learning a whole new language as well. Uphill battle. Meanwhile, polling data showing. Now, this, in my view, this headline is misleading. What? A misleading headline coming out of the Globe and Mail? What? Majority of Canadians comfortable or somewhat comfortable with Liberal NDP power sharing deal. Technically true. Technically true. A Nanos research commissioned by the Globe and Mail found that 39% of Canadians were comfortable with the agreement, 19% were somewhat comfortable, 11% were somewhat uncomfortable, 29% uncomfortable, 2% unsure. Do they have a graph? Of course not. Don't want to make it clear, right? Don't want to make it clear how close this actually is, right? Like, it is a majority, because you have, 40% of the populace saying uncomfortable or somewhat uncomfortable, while you've got 58% saying that they are comfortable or somewhat comfortable, right? So it's 58% to 40%, right? As far as majorities go, that's not a huge one, but it is a majority. It's fair to say it. We do have stories coming out such as this, where media not interested when Singh confronted by Sikhs. Right, there are members of the Sikh community who are confronting fellow Sikh Jagmeet Singh about this, and so I think it's fair to say that there is going to be a vocal minority who are going to be. And I think it's fair to say that that's us, right? Like, we are a vocal minority who are upset with this arrangement. That I definitely see it as a capitulation of the values of the NDP. I don't think that the NDP should be propping up the Liberals in this ad hoc kind of manner. Essentially Jagmeet Singh has just become a junior partner of the Liberal Party. He might as well just become a Liberal. And it really, really confirms my view that Jagmeet Singh only really wants to be the leader of the NDP. I don't think he actually cares to be the Prime Minister of Canada. I think his goal is to be the leader of the NDP, and that's what he's doing. In short, Nazi fascism hinged on creating one streamlined, overarching lie. The Nazis built an ideology on a fiction, the notion that Germany's defeat in World War I. I mean, what is it, the Weimar period? No, why am I forgetting the treaty? The Treaty of Versailles was bad for Germany, just on an economic stretch, right? John, are you interested to read an article on how a white right-winger is trying to dispel the myth that we have a surplus of homes? Oh my God. If only for bullshit, right? Comfortable. Sounds like something a doctor would ask. Yeah, comfortable is an interesting word to use as well, right? Like, why not say, do you accept? Or are you happy that? Or, but at the same time, like, how do you say it even? Like, are you fine with it? Like, what? I would have preferred, does it change your voting opinion? Will it change the way you vote? You know? Like, to me, that's the more interesting question. Because, like, there's a difference between, like, are you comfortable with it? And, like, is it going to change the way you vote? Does it change your support for the party? Right? Why not say, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much does this arrangement change your support for the Liberals and then the NDP? Right? Like, ask them what they're, on a scale from 1 to 10, what's your current support for the NDP? And then on a scale from 1 to 10, what do you think this is going to create? Right? A surplus of homes, interesting thought. There is a surplus of homes. There's for sure a surplus of homes. The billionaire class has bought up all the homes, and they're sitting on empty properties. Like, we know this is true. Like, this sort of odd... And of course right-wingers want to pretend like it's not happening. 404, a missing page. 404, it doesn't work. Too bad. No page for you. Almost a quarter of Canadians reporting eating less when they should, due to rising prices. 1 in 5 Canadians reported going hungry at least once between March 20th and 2022. Did you post it again? Because this... Boop, no good. No good. No good. No good. I think maybe you added a 4. I think that's what happened here, bud. Let me see if I can fix it. I think you might have hit enter and 4 at the same time. I bet that's what happened. Copy link. Copy link. Oh, get out of here. Get out of here, you beautiful man. Paste. Back. Enter. I figured it out. Yeah, you definitely hit a 4. Oh, from a Financial Post. This is fantastic. Busting the myth of Canada's million or more vacant homes. A deep dive by Mirza Haider and Stephen Moranis reveals the alarmists have misinterpreted the data. Here we go. Recent media accounts and development agency reports suggest Canada's housing affordability problem is being made worse by more than 1 million homes sitting empty. But a deep dive into the vacancy data reveals the alarmists have misinterpreted the information. Many believe investors and those owning multiple homes contribute to worsening housing affordability by keeping dwellings empty that could house tenants or new millennial owners. Hence, critics say, housing conditions would improve if these 1 million-plus vacant homes were made available for buying or renting. Yeah, that's the argument. Vancouver imposed a vacant home tax in 2017. Toronto's doing the same this year. But the vacant tax in Vancouver has not netted tens of thousands of empty properties. A similar outcome is expected in Toronto, where the local government expects to find 6,500 to 9,600 vacant dwellings, though some or many would qualify for an exemption from the vacant home tax. Yeah, some or many would qualify for an exemption. And why? Because who's writing the law? Right? Who's writing these laws? Right? So you got the landlords who own the property writing the law and giving it to the politicians to pass. Of course, they're going to create a series of loopholes that they can just step through and then pass this law to pander to the public and be like, look, we're trying to do something. Look. Right? So it's all fucking theater, and they admit it. Right? But it turns out that the percentage of vacant homes is actually low, even lower in high-demand urban areas. Furthermore, some dwellings are temporarily vacant for a reason. For example, transitioning from one occupant to another. Okay. Well, let's see their argument. The reason many believe in the fable that more than 1 million homes are lying vacant in Canada is a cavalier misinterpretation of Statistics Canada data. So we take Stats Can data that says there are empty homes, and we say, look, empty homes, and that's a misinterpretation of the data. Okay. To get to the origins of the exaggerated assertions, we reverted to the primary source of the claim, which is a report distributed by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. So they're refuting the OECD here, right? The report suggests that around 8% of the housing stock in Canada was vacant, more than 1.3 million vacant dwellings. So the OECD, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, has said that there is 8% of the housing stock is vacant. I actually think that number is probably pretty low too, right? Yeah, rich homeowners paying MPs for laws to make life easier for landowners, of course, right? The OECD vacancy estimates sparked subsequent news media accounts that this was causing affordability to worsen. Of course it would be. You're removing 10% of your stock. Yeah. OECD noted commie organization. Exactly, right? Yeah. What's interesting about just on a side note, like there are capitalists that are trying to tell the truth. Like I think Peter Schiff is one of these guys. Like Peter Schiff is like a Reaganite, right wing, like the government is the problem kind of place. Now the OECD is a capitalist organization, right? But both the OECD and and Peter Schiff, and there are others, understand that, well, if you want to be an investor and you want to make a bunch of money, you got to know what's going on, and you got to be honest about what's happening. You can't just believe the fucking dumb propaganda, and you can't just believe, like, obviously they're lying, like, and you've got to be cleverer than just, oh, that's what they said, so that's got to be the truth, $1 million. Like, you got to be cleverer than that if you want to actually make money, right? And that's their goal, make money. That's all they care about, make money. And so when the OECD comes out and says, hey, there's vacancies, and that's causing affordability to worsen, they're not saying that because they're like, and then we'll scheme and all, because their goal is to make money. That's their fucking goal, right? But I kind of like it. I kind of love them when they do that kind of shit. When you get capitalist organizations that are like, no, we should probably tell the truth, right? Because they understand that the only way that the system actually works at all is if you tell the truth, right? But, you know, welcome to capitalism. Rewards the liars regularly. Okay, the OECD reportedly sourced data from the Canadian government. Oh, so literally the Canadian government, okay, and pointed to a Canadian data portal, Census Mapper, as the source of vacant dwelling data. Literally the census. Literally the census, okay. The Census Mapper data is essentially sourced directly from Statistics Canada. But a quick look at the data portal reveals that some well-meaning individuals erroneously confused unoccupied dwellings with vacant dwellings, thus contributing to the widely exaggerated estimates of empty home despite the posted caveats. Is there a difference? What's the difference? Census Mapper defines, oh, here we go, unoccupied dwellings as being either unoccupied or temporarily occupied by a person with a primary residence elsewhere in Canada or abroad. Similarly, Statistics Canada described an unoccupied dwelling for the 2016 census as a private dwelling fit for year-round living, but no one was residing there on May 10th, 2016. Right, so what's the common correlation? People owning more properties than one, right? Multiple property owners, right? Were these dwellings occupied or vacant? This argument that you were about to see really smacks of like technicalityism and like tilting of the fedora, going actually, right? Even if no one resided there on census day, did it remain unoccupied for a week, a month, or an entire year? So this is just shade throwing, right? The OECD has provided government data, and you're literally responding with just shade throwing. Did it remain occupied for a week, month, the entire year? What about the several 100,000 cottages scattered across Canada that might be labeled unoccupied on census day, but were certainly not vacant? Jens von Bergman, who has previously taught at the University of Calgary, University of Calgary, really credible if you ask me, said that some dwellings labeled as unoccupied by Census Mapper might actually be occupied, just not by the usual residents. For example, residences used as temporary housing for students or workers are not vacant, but are considered unoccupied by the usual residents. So literally, like, what's the common theme here? You have a multiple homeowner, a person who owns more home than one. and they've got a property, and they're just using it for whatever the fuck they want, and that doesn't include housing people, right? That's like, oh, so you can get a student like float in on your Airbnb bullshit, right? The Canadian census, relying on input from enumerators, designates dwellings as vacant or otherwise on census day. Regrettably, these statistics are not part of the standard released by Statistics Canada. Fortunately, Census Mapper obtained special tabulations from the agency and has made the data available online. Isn't that nice? A breakdown by the structural type of housing and city census subdivision revealed the vacancy rate was much lower than 8% in urban Canada. Don't you love it? Was much lower than 8% in urban Canada. Considering that while the overall vacancy rate in the city of Toronto was 4.6%, census enumerators in 2016 identified a mere 2.2% of the single detached dwellings as vacant, even low, but not unoccupied. Right? You see what they've done? They've created a different category, and then they've gone down this path here, right? So they've literally split it into two, said that that's a problem, and now we're hyper focusing on one of the categories while ignoring another. And just hoping that you're too stupid to see that this is what's going on. Which is, the majority of Canadians. Even lower shares of single detached homes were found empty in Montreal and Calgary at 1.8, 4, blah, 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 blah. The city of Vancouver reported a large share of vacant dwellings. What about unoccupied? Oh, that's just gone. We're no longer even talking about unoccupied. You see what they've done? They've just eliminated half of the thing. So they've literally cut the category in half and just eliminated it from the conversation. You see how they did that? We're no longer talking about unoccupied homes at all. It's just vacancy now. Interesting. Even the empty dwelling counted by the enumerators are likely to be exaggerated because of how the census defines an apartment in a duplex, which is one or two dwellings located one above the other. If an owner decided to absorb the secondary suite in the primary dwelling, he owns two properties. Like, over and over and over and over and over again, notice how the article just doesn't point out that the issue is that one person owns multiple properties. That's the issue. One person is owning multiple properties while other people do not have one. That's the core issue that we've been talking about over and over again. And this article is doing everything it possibly can to throw shade at that idea and obfuscate the data, obviously, in order to lie to the public about the seriousness of the issue, which is very serious, right? If an owner decided to absorb the secondary suite, primary dwelling, census enumerators may still count the secondary suite as vacant. Yeah, because just because one guy owns two properties doesn't mean he's using both properties, right? Like, multiple homes are owned by single individuals. That's the problem. Hence, the highest share of vacant dwellings is for apartments or flats in duplexes. A small percentage of dwellings will always be unoccupied or vacant. For example, a private retail home between successive tenants, a dwelling undergoing renovations, or owners being temporarily away from work will cause dwellings to be unoccupied. Dude, if you ever hear anybody saying these talking points, they have brain rot. Like, the problem is one person owning multiple properties, right? Mr. Camacho, striving for 100% of the dwellings to be occupied all the time is neither practical nor useful, nor it is the claim that anybody is actually making, but okay. The supply skeptics, however, continue to lobby the government against building more homes. The myth of a million or more vacant homes or empty bedrooms is nothing but smoke screens, a prudent way forward for the federal liberals to ignore supply skepticism and blah, 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 blah. This is unconvincing garbage. If this is the best that they've got, all they're doing is proving to me that they literally are fraudulent liars who we should definitely not be paying attention to ever. This little trick that they did here, right, where they created a disparity and a difference, or they created a difference between unoccupied and vacancy, and then proceeded to completely ignore the unoccupied data and just focus on the, like, you talk about smoke screens. Like, these guys are assholes, right? These guys are total fucking assholes. Like, the problem is that there's multiple houses owned by single individuals. That's the problem. This whole article in one word, but, well, what about, this is just whataboutism. No, it's just unconvincing, is what it is. Like, it's just completely unconvincing, if you ask me. Like, Like literally, first of all, the fact that they're obfuscating the data, right? First of all, the fact that they're running up against like literally the OECD and Statistics Canada itself, right? It's just a very unconvincing argument that basically boils down to, well, those rich people are using it occasionally. That's essentially their entire argument. Like when you actually distill it down to its core, like what's the fundamental core of this article's argument? Well, the rich people who own it occasionally do use it. They do. Well, this guy, he took 2 units and made it 1 unit. So now he has double the living space. That's what he did. Right? Like, multiple people owning, or single people owning multiple properties. That's the issue. And this article goes to show you how seriously this particular point is starting to reach the halls of power, right? Because they're actually feeling the need to put forward this kind of garbage. And this is garbage, guys. Like, I can't believe... if somebody actually... So, hold on. So, a professor of real estate management at Ryerson University. So, Ryerson University, you can just flush down the toilet now. A real estate industry veteran. Okay, great. Like, literally just don't trust these sources any longer. Because if this is the unconvincing garbage that they're putting out. Like, get the fuck out of here. Yeah, I rented it for 2 weeks of the year. It's technically in use. Exactly. That's exactly the argument that they're using. It's just like, well, but the rich people used it twice during the year, so it's okay, right? Well, they stored their cars there for a while, so it's okay. It's their entire argument. Yep. How often do we hear how many politicians are actually landlords, right? The only source you trust is John TV? Well, isn't that kind? All right, guys, I'm going to take a bit of a break for a minute. What's the one I actually wanted to play? Is it this one? Nah. Come on. There we go. This guy right here. This is the Bank of Canada Deputy Governor Paul Beaudry.
Eric Hertzberg from Bloomberg, please. I'll go now to Eric Hertzberg from Bloomberg, please.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'd like to just follow up to Kevin Carmichael's question on softish landings and hard landings. Putting aside what your current forecasts are for Canada's economy and the desirable outcomes, would you be prepared to engineer a recession if that was what was necessary to achieve the inflation target?
Okay. Our mandate is clear. It's the inflation target. That's what we have to do. We have to do what's necessary to get there, and we'll do what's necessary. But at the same time, we try to do it in the way that's the best for Canadians. But the bottom line is we will get inflation back to 2%, and we'll do what's necessary to get it there.
You hear what he said? Hear what he said? Recession incoming, even if we have to do it on purpose. Our goal is to get that number down to 2%, and by God damn it, we'll destroy you if we've got to do it. Get fucked, right? Get fucked. Just get completely fucked, right? Like, forget about the fact that even having an inflation target of 2% is itself just an excuse for corporations to raise their prices by 2% every year, right? Like, forget about that for a second. But, like, you know what would be a great way to actually confront this inflation thing? Price controls. Just tell these corporations to get fucked, right? They're making more money than they ever have. It's obvious what's happening. Right? They're just jacking prices, and now we've got the Bank of Canada saying that, that these assholes jacking prices, instead of confronting them and telling them they can't do that, right? We're going to commit austerity against the public. That's what the what's his official title? What's his official title? The Bank of Canada Deputy Governor, Paul Beaudry, right? So these psychos are so committed to maintaining the wealth and power of the oligarch class that they're openly telling you that they're willing to destroy the economy and destroy the society in order to protect the right of corporations to jack their prices. What's necessary is capitalism for letting you starve. That's right. That's right. Absolutely brutal. Like, absolutely fucking asinine. Meanwhile, right, almost a quarter of Canadians report eating less than they should due to rising prices. Like, and that's going to get worse. It's just going to get significantly worse. Right? And we are a wealthy country. We have all of these resources. We have all of this land. We have all of this kind of stuff going on. But we can't feed our people. Keep in mind, people, they don't want you to raise wages. Yeah, that's the problem, really, with the inflation, is the pesky wages, right? It's those pesky wages, right? That's what's causing inflation. Certainly not price gouging, which is obviously what's happening, right? Like, they're so desperate to convince you that there's like this economic flowchart thing. Look, there's a mathematical formula you don't understand, and I'm not going to show you, of course, to make you understand what it is. But you got to promise me that right behind this curtain, guys, right behind this curtain, there's an economic system that's very complicated, has a lot of math. It definitely exists, but I can't show you. And even if I do show you, you're not going to understand it. It takes a long time to understand these things, right? And I can't explain it to you in a manner that makes it comprehensible to you because it's so complex and it would take so long to do, right? So you just got to get to the universities and do it. Yeah, it's all real. Yeah, for sure, it's all absolutely real, you guys. You just got to keep believing as hard as you can, right? That there's this whole model and there's this whole system and there's whole kind of stuff and all of that dies at the altar of corporations raise prices. Obviously. Like, you have to be thick. Like, you got to be sitting there being like, yeah, I guess that makes sense, to not understand rich assholes raise prices, blame inflation. Like, you got to be thick to think that something else is happening, right? Obviously, the inflation that's happening is just asshole corporations raising their prices and saying, not inflation, pesky wages, right? Don't you remember the math from the school of jabroni? Lower wages is good. Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. Higher wages make higher prices. So as prices rise anyway, the wages can't, because the price will rise even more. Well, and there's no real evidence to show that higher wages make higher prices, right? Like, this is one of the great misnomers. Like, if a single individual company wants to raise their wages, then that single individual company does need to raise their prices. But if everybody is, through an increase of the minimum wage, forced to raise their prices, or forced to raise their wages, well, what this creates is it actually creates a system where everybody has money to spend all of a sudden, right? So your demand increases, right? So if you raise wages, sure, technically you'll need to go up by like 0.2% or whatever in terms of your prices, but you'll have the entire society all at once gets an increase in its demand because it gets more money to spend, right? And that's what we see every single time that there is a wage increase. And then why do prices increase? Because greedy asshole capitalists are like, people got more money, so I'll double the rent, right? So what's the solution? Price controls, nationalization, get rid of the parasites, confront the capitalist class, chase them away. Won't they leave? Good. Get rid of them. They're parasites. Goodbye. It's very, very fucking straightforward shit. Like, these people are negative drain on our society in huge and significant ways that are observable, that you can see, that are plain for anyone without a nail in their head to see, right? They obviously are taking advantage of the public. Landlords are the worst of them, in my view. Like, Mao was right. Yeah, Bezos being paid $1,000 million didn't make prices rise. Yeah, exactly. How come prices don't rise when shareholders make $100 million? Yeah, but Bezos is just one guy, don't you know? Yeah, one big giant dragon sitting on a pile of money. Like, And we're all just taking it. Oh yeah, imagine coming up with an idea so fucked up that the ethics board of a taser company resigns in protest. Axon halts its plan for a taser drone as 9 on ethics board resign over the project. What have I been telling you guys this whole time? What have I been telling you guys this whole fucking time? Right? These drones, these little robot dogs, all this kind of stuff. These are military weapons that they are designing to inflict on the populace, to oppress us directly through military robotic hardware. Anybody who thinks otherwise is a moron. Like down to the ground. Do not listen to what they say, dumb fucking idiot. Obviously, they're using these to weaponize them against the public. Obviously, you've got to be ridiculously stupid to think otherwise. These taser drones are so disgusting that the people of the ethics board of the company resign over it. Well, just wait. Just wait. They'll find those ethics board people who'll be fine with it. But they'll just get new people, right? And soon, right, when we form up in protest, as we do, right, wait. You'll see the little drone floating in the background with that guy with the binoculars, right? There'll be a guy with binoculars, right? Oh, and that guy with the binoculars is there to act as reconnaissance, to act as information gathering, to try to find spots of problems, to locate resources, and then he'll eventually be able to go send drones over there, and they'll send drones and shoot people with tasers. That's what's coming. And then, and my favorite's going to be the robot dogs, because the robot dogs are going to be able to just charge groups of people and shoot smoke grenades out of it and shoot them with tasers while they're doing it, right? I am of the opinion that if we see these things, we have every right to destroy them. We have every right, a basic human right to destroy these on sight. These robot dogs, these fucking drones, any of that kind of shit, we have the right to destroy them. Utterly. Tough day, folks. Worker killed at my workplace last night. National Steel Car. I'm sorry to hear that, Watson, bud. I am sorry to hear that, man. That's a sobering moment. Absolutely, that's a sobering moment. Yeah, I had a moment like that. I used to work in funeral services, right? And not often, but occasionally, I would end up at an industrial plant somewhere where there was some kind of industrial accident, and I would be responsible for getting the guy, right? And it's a very real thing. It's a very, very real thing, which is why unions are so important, which is why ensuring safety on the work floor is so important. Bud, I'm so sorry about that, man. How well did you know him? How well did you know him, bud? Yeah. I think about this all the time, you know, like, is all of this industrialization, is all of this technology, is all of it worth it? Do we think it's worth it, what we've done? All of the engines and the cars and the ships and the boats. I didn't know the guy, but another guy in my department saw the whole thing. Oof. Guy was crushed by 3 tons of steel after a lifting device failed. That's more or less what happened on the guy that I was picking up. Yeah, it was like a lifting device failed and he got crushed. It's a bit close to home, eh, Watson? That's a bit close to home. 3 people killed there in less than 24 months. That's a crisis, if you ask me. That's a crisis, if you ask me. Like 3 people killed? Less than 24 months? Yep. You got yourself a workplace crisis, Watson. Time to start rattling your union. Like, any media surrounding it? Anybody talking to you guys? Anybody talking? Like, that's if you ask me, that's quite a story. Like, people should not be dying in their workplaces. Right? They should not be dying in their workplaces. Straight up. Who's responsible? Who's responsible for maintaining the safety of this equipment? Who's responsible? Right? Sorry to hear that you're going through that, Watson. That's. It doesn't feel good to be reminded of your mortality. Certainly. I Need Yetis is asking, what do you think about this new outbreak of monkeypox? There's always something. There is always something. So far, not that serious. Keep an eye on it, though. CHCH TV in Hamilton interviews the union president tonight at 6. All right. All right. When you say tonight at 6, like tomorrow? Because it's 8 now. Because I'd like to see that myself. Like that's not an unserious story. Keep me up to date, okay, Watson? Keep me up to date, bud. Yeah, oh, like an hour ago. Okay, so it did just happen. Okay. Okay. Hold on. Here, if you've got a, you don't need to do this right now, Watson, but if you can find a link for me for that video or something, I'll show it on my stream. Because like these are the things that like this is what the workers are putting up with. Like this is the seriousness of the conversations that we're having, right? Like the thing is that we just live in it in the abstract, more or less, right? That for many of us, outside of our own lived experience, this is an abstraction, right? But it isn't an abstraction. Like we live with this, we live with that looming fear and this looming kind of thing, and we begin to ask ourselves, is this valuable, what we're doing? Like, is there value in having built this entire highway system, all these cars, all this absurd pollution? Like, is there value in this? Where you wake up in a house and drive in a car for an hour to get to a job you hate, to turn around and come back home, an hour in your car to fall asleep, turn around, do it again? Is that valuable? Is that the way a person should live? The way a person should be? You know? Like we've got all of this wealth and we've got all of this prosperity and we've got all of this. And we're just not CHCH. 51. Ministry of Labor is investigating. Yeah. Well, keep us up to date, Watson. Keep us up to date. This doesn't really have much more than what you've reported, so. Ministry shut the plant down today. Yeah. Well, I mean, one's got to think that, and I know if I was a worker in this establishment, I would be thinking, what else is going to fail? That's what I would be thinking, right? You're telling me that we just had a lift fail, a lift device fail, and it crushed a man, killed him. Well, what else is going to fail? What else in this place is going to fail? What other security safeguards are not ready to go? And is this, like, these sorts of things don't just fail, right? You don't just go from 100 to 0. That's not usually how that works. There's usually a series of events. There's usually something. Yeah, Ward, 200 years from now, we'll know if it's all worth it. Well, 200 years from, like, this is what's so funny is, like, we have to literally change everything, right? Like, we based everything on oil. We based everything on this idea that we have an infinite amount of something that's by definition not non-renewable. And we have to change everything. We have to. Like, by definition, we have to change everything. And right now, our leadership is basically saying the way to change everything is to just let the free market decide. Just let chaos reign. Right? Let the marketplace of ideas decide. So essentially let the rich people do what they want. Right? And we've seen how stupid these people are. Right? Like, they're incredibly stupid. Like, people like Jeff Bezos, people like, sand. You're right, we're running out of sand. Right? Unbelievable. But you're right, we're running out of sand. And these people, like people like Jeff Bezos, people like Musk, these guys are dumb. Like, they are unintelligent. And they have no vision for the future whatsoever. All they've done is sell a vision of the future so that they could push through, like, the militarization of the society. Right? We've got a militarized space. Well, how do we pitch this at the public? Oh, it's so that we can get to Mars. Well, what's the actual groundwork that needs to be laid if you want to actually get to Mars if you're a country like the United States? Well, you need to militarize space first. Yeah, well, this is what happens when the free market decides. I mean, death cult is the correct term. Yeah, just another sacrifice, right? Just another sacrifice. And for what? To achieve what exactly? You know? Just seems like we're all caught up in, like, the whims of an oligarch class. And when you actually look at the quality of the men within the oligarchy, you realize pretty quickly that we're ruled by dumb children who make bad decisions constantly, fail at everything they do, and are too stupid to even achieve the small, meager plans that they set out. Like, this guy can't make a car that doesn't blow up. The fucking tunnel, for God's sakes. 5 gondola cars and a piecework rate. That's what this amounted to. Yeah. My dad used to do health and safety and emergency medical work at construction sites. He has gruesome stories, but doesn't like talking about it. Yeah. He was there for an event that made Trans-Canada Highway make a policy that workers like him had to be fully dedicated to emergency work. Yeah. Because a guy died while my dad was being asked to do other stuff. Yeah. Are drone jammers legal? If successful, jamming devices often render the drone inoperative. Section 4.4 and 9.1b of the Radio Communication Act prohibit the use, possession, manufacturing, importing, distribution, leasing, offering for sale, and sale of jamming devices in Canada. Yeah. What? They don't want you to have the one thing that would fuck up their plan to create, like, a drone and robot dog army? Wild. I'm shocked. I don't really care to read this article about Musk because, like, first of all, it's long, but also, like, the people who are actually, like, simping for this guy are unbelievable dullards. Like, this guy is so obviously a cover for the military-industrial complex to move forward and militarize aspects of society that no rational person would allow be militarized, right? Like, no, it's wrong for the police force to have access to robot dogs. It's wrong for the police force to have access to drones. These things are morally reprehensible for a police force to have, and that the simple fact that they possess them delegitimizes the police force as an operating element in the society. Like, if I am more or less of the opinion that if I found out my police force had one of these drones that were shooting tasers and shit, it delegitimizes the police force. That this is an oppressive military that is invading constantly. Doink, doink. For those who are interested, such as Eric is interested. Jamming devices are easy to make. Very illegal in the US, though. Yeah, of course. We have laws in the books called the Westray Law. It makes the employee culpable found guilty of industrial murder. Only one employer has ever been found guilty since that law has been on the books. Yeah, I mean, you got to prove a type of. There's a difference between, like, you know, an accident and negligence, and so you got to show negligence is what you got to show, right? And it's more likely, as Generation Y Me sort of tells a story of this. Was it you or was it? Yeah, it was you. That it's more likely that the standards get changed rather than a charge like that coming down. And most people actually end up being find that to be acceptable, right? Like if I had a brother or a loved one who died in an industrial accident, and it was discovered that the reason why he dies in an industrial accident is because of an oversight issue or some kind of thing here, and then that issue gets rectified, and then of course there's like other compensation that occurs to the family and all of that. I think most people would walk away from that feeling like, yeah, okay, like, it's my question as a commentator, and I've said it several times already, rhetorically, I suppose, but I do think we need to confront it, is what are we getting out of this? What is this all actually for? Right? Like, we seem to be doing a lot of activity. Is it actually benefiting us? Are we actually creating that a better society? Are we a better people for all of it? I mean, the craziest thing that exists in our society is that we have access to all of this information, that we have more information now than we've ever had. It's all at our fingertips, but we don't have time to actually do any. So we're still this, like, enormously illiterate, unempathetic, compassionless society. Man, did you see that W5 report on the mill in Dryden? Tons of people working at the mill have brain damage now, but the company was running the mill at the time isn't getting sued or anything? Yeah. That's wild, dude. I don't even know how to respond to that. For profit and wealth accumulation for the top, which translates to power at the top. Yeah, of course. It's an oligarchy, right? Like, there's no other way. There's nothing else to call it, right? And when we get stories like this, right? This I am going to read, because I actually think this is interesting and important, right? Why Dimitri Lascaris isn't running again for the Green Party leadership. We spoke to Lascaris about why he decided not to run again, and the hostile atmosphere towards dissent on Western foreign policy that contributed to his decision. In this week's episode of North Untapped, we spoke to eco-socialist lawyer and activist Dimitri Lascaris, about why he has decided not to run again for Green Party leader, and the hostile atmosphere towards dissent on Western foreign policy that contributed to his decision. We also discussed Lascaris' concerns about how former leader Elizabeth May would have gone to every conceivable length to derail his campaign, and the public conflicts that would likely have ensued as a result, particularly if Lascaris ended up winning the leadership contest. Shortly after last year's federal election and in the wake of Annamie Paul's resignation as Green Party leader, Lascaris told the Maple that he was weighing another leadership run very carefully, noting at the time that the result in the last leadership contest, where we were actually ahead on the 5th ballot and finished a close second, was encouraging in terms of our prospects. However, last month, Lascaris announced that he would not run again. In an article explaining his decision, he wrote, "Since the last leadership contest, I have been dismayed by a precipitous decline in the quality of political discourse in Canada, and in the West generally. Intolerance for dissent has increased dramatically. Censorship has been normalized. In particular, those who dare to oppose Western militarism or our failed economic system are being marginalized and suppressed to a degree that is unprecedented in my lifetime. In this extraordinarily difficult political environment, I feel that I can best contribute by remaining an independent voice of dissent." I mean, brother doesn't want to get shot. Sounds like to me, right? Sounds like this guy just doesn't want to get shot. Pretty normal position. You're doing good work, John. Thank you, Ward. I appreciate that a lot, bud. I do appreciate that. Good opportunity to say like, share, subscribe, guys. Send it around. Tell people I exist. Let people know that I'm here, right? Please tell people what we're doing here. It's a solidarity movement that we're building. Generation Y Me, they have the brain damage similar to pro athletes with multiple concussions, but in the mill workers' case, it came from prolonged exposure to bad chemicals and gases. Ugh. That's a long fight, dude. Because proving that kind of thing in court is actually quite difficult. And the court system is not exactly sympathetic to these sorts of cases. Like, I knew somebody who experienced like a chemical damaging, like a brain, it messed with their head back in the 70s, and it took 20 years before they got a resolution to it, right? Like, it's just absolutely brutal how long these sorts of stories can be dragged out for. And it's the same playbook over and over again, right? Like, just deny, ask for more insurmountable evidence, more studies, right? Yeah, it was happening in like the 2000s, yeah. Poland establishes terrifying pregnancy register after banning almost all abortions. So to put this kind of in the context of what's going on, right? Like, the concern of what we are seeing in Europe is a rise in far-right ideologies, right? We're also seeing that happening in the United States with the overturn of Roe v. Wade. The society is moving sharply to the right. Well, here's an article I found about Poland. Oh, I had it right in front of my face. Terrifying pregnancy registry after banning almost all abortions. A new government database is tracking people's pregnancies in Poland and is sparking fears that medical data will be used to prosecute women who obtain abortion care in other countries or by getting abortion pills through the mail, and potentially to target women who have miscarriages. Women in the United States have already been targeted for having miscarriages, right? You've got to prove in court that it wasn't an abortion, that it was in fact a miscarriage, which is abhorrent. Health Minister Adam Niedzecki approved an ordinance last Friday expanding the kind of information that can be stored in a central database on patients, including allergies, blood type, and pregnancy status. Tracking pregnancies in the country is necessary, he claimed, so doctors know if a woman shouldn't receive certain medications or x-rays. But in a country that banned abortion care in almost all cases in 2020, with exceptions theoretically in the case of health risks to pregnant women or of a pregnancy that resulted from rape or incest. Parliament member Camilla Gasiuk-Piowicz said Tuesday that the register would be used to persecute and control Polish women. Polish women no longer get pregnant for fear of being forced to give birth in any situation. The reason for fear have just arrived, said Agnieszka, Dzemianowicz-Bach, another left-wing lawmaker. The pregnancy registry in a country with an almost complete ban on abortion is terrifying. The register will make it more difficult for Polish women to get around the abortion ban by ordering medication to induce an abortion or to travel to other European countries for care, as many have since the law was passed, said journalist Elizabeth Schumacher. Abortion Network Amsterdam, a network of volunteers in the Netherlands which provides financial and logistical support to people seeking abortions, said it would still help each and everyone who is seeking an abortion. The register represents another violent attack on sexual and reproductive rights in Poland, said international human rights advocate Annika Ojala. The reason why I'm reading this, and I mean I'm happy with, we don't need to go any farther, this is what's coming for America, and probably Canada. Our conservatives have been pretty soft on the touch when it comes to this abortion issue, right? They know that most Canadians have made up their mind on it. They don't have the power to be able to shift political opinion on this issue, but the United States is already doing it, and many states are already doing it. You can get ready for it. Get ready for it. Roe v. Wade I find scary because it seems to open up the way for other laws, not just abortion, to never mind criminal courts, push it all into civil, let people sue each other into oblivion, yeah. Good old piss party, far right comes through again. Yeah, the limiting of abortion is part of a larger attack on democratic rights by the ruling class through the religious and pious evangelicals, yeah. Like, just make it difficult to actually live in the world, right? And if you ask me, which you are, because you're here and you're listening to me, isn't that lovely? Thank you so much. Like, share, subscribe. Don't forget to donate. There's the button. You can donate to my Patreon, get into the Discord, all of that kind of fun stuff. If you're donating $1, maybe think about making it $2. What this is doing is it is making sex itself scarier. Right? From the woman's perspective, sex is already a very difficult subject, right? The burden of reproduction rests on the woman solely. That if the woman gets pregnant, that's her problem. That the man can literally walk away, and there's nothing that can be done about it. And so what this means is that from the woman's perspective, every sexual act is a risk. And this creates an environment of oppression, where sex is not open, it's not free, it's not something that someone can explore without fear of these major negative consequences being placed into the conversation. And so you just end up with a society that's more repressed, that's more incapable of dealing with its own sexuality and its own desires. And of course, you guys know me, right? I back the chakra system. We don't start here, we start here, right? It's why if someone's like, I don't trust the opinion of virgins. There you go. You want me to say something outrageous today? You want my big bigotry of the day or my big generalization of the day? If I find out that you're a virgin, I don't really care about your opinion. Like, straight up. There is something you have not experienced that I think is central and core to the experience of being a human being. And that's sex. Right? If you're not having sex, if you're not doing sex, if you're not participating in sex, you're not really engaged. You're not really here, as far as I'm concerned. And I say this, and I'll admit straight out, I was an evangelical fundamentalist Christian. I was a virgin until I was 23, right? And I look back on me at the age of 22, I wouldn't have listened to a thing that guy had to say, right? Don't trust people who have not experienced what life has to offer them. And we're creating a system that's making it harder for people to engage in reality and engage in the act of sex. We are an anti-sex society. Right? And the hilariousness of it is that we are ruled by a group of people who call themselves pro-family when they are nothing of the sort. Right? They're pro-military, and they understand that they need more babies born for their military, which is the core of it, if you ask me. The reason why all of this is going on is because of the heavy militarization of the society, that we need to plunge the society into desperate straits so that the military becomes the only place where a person can go. And if you force people to have the baby, well, then you've got a disposable fodder, don't you? Which is exactly what we're trying to get. It's just disposable fodder. And so it makes the society worse from all angles. There is no argument outside of this sort of pious jerking off over fetuses that exists. And you can tell that it's completely false. Like, it's completely phony, right? Because they don't give a fuck about that kid when he's born. Like, when the kid's born, fuck him, right? Toughen up, stand up straight, fuck you, right? Because they know what they're going to do to that kid. They know what the whole point of that kid being born is to just drive him into military service and get him killed overseas. That's the whole point. So why be nice to him? Why treat him with respect and dignity? We got to toughen him up anyway, so that we can turn him into a little psychopath, so that when he just massacres kids in the streets like the CIA did in Afghanistan, he's fine with it, right? Get laid, Eric. Go get laid. Go get laid. Go get laid. Go get laid, bud. You're missing out. I don't have a lot of regrets in my life. You know what I do regret? Not having more sex. Go get laid, bud. Whatever you're hanging on to, let it go. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. Yeah, exactly. Oddity, you're right. I wish it were that easy, but like, you don't also need to get in your own way about it. You don't also need to buy into whatever it is you're buying into, right? Like, methane with the hot take, sex isn't worth it. But this is a fair thing too, isn't it, Methane? Like, it's not like it, and Oddities bring it up. It's not like sex is easy to find in this society. It's not like it's free and open. It's not like it's not like you can even really go down to your local pub and there'll be like a lady sitting at the bar waiting for people to talk to her, right? Like, it's getting, yeah, may as well tell me to get a better job. Yeah. No, I hear you, and I'm with you. But it is that we've created a society, and we should be open about it, right? We've created a very repressed, scared, hesitant society, right? That just doesn't want to open itself up. And this creates statements like sex isn't worth it. And there's a truth to this, isn't there? Like, is it worth dealing with? First of all, you've got all of the odd gender-based, like the gender-based conversations that are happening these days are odd, right? Or difficult to navigate. Maybe that's the best way to say it. There's a lot of things going on that seem difficult to navigate. There's a lot of hesitancy. There's a lot of mistrust. There's a lot of skepticism. Honestly, as a man, and I think as a woman too, I don't think that this is strictly a man's situation, but there's a lot of abuse. There's a lot of abuse that you have to take, and let's take that down one notch. Let's not use the word abuse There's a lot of rejection, and there's a lot of dismissal, right? So let's not elevate it to the point of abuse, but you do have to face a lot of rejection and a lot of dismissal. I think dismissal is the biggest part about it, that we're so disconnected from one another. There's no sense of community, and everyone is so skeptical of one another. Women are super skeptical of men right now because men can simply abandon women. They can. In a society where there's no community, nobody knows anybody, everybody's just like a grifter, basically. Everybody's just like a walk through the town kind of Lone Star grifter, right? You can just ghost people. We even made a term for it. It's called ghosting, right? So it's how do you even, like, and in a post-pandemic society, right? Like, where do you even go to meet these people? Where are, like, the singles mixers? Where are all of these places? Where are these single people? Where do they exist? We don't know, right? And then, of course, there is, like, I think, Major, you're right to bring it up, right? There's the economic aspect of it, right? I work in retail, so that basically means that I'll only ever connect with other people who are working in retail. Like, I'm never going to end up with a banker or a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer or any of that. It's just not going to happen, right? And that's an economic truth. And I feel like that touches on the reality that you're living, right? That we're so divided, and everything's about status, and everything's about your position, right? And if nobody cares about the quality of your heart, nobody cares about the quality of how much you want to give, right? Yeah, actually, there usually is a lady at the end of a bar. Of course, she's working. It'll cost you. Isn't that right? Yeah. Capitalism commodifies everything, right? And I don't denigrate prostitutes, right? I don't begrudge people who use them. I have never done so. I have been tempted to do so in the past. Probably will continue to be tempted to do so, but I've never actually done. But I understand all sides of that equation. Makes complete sense to me, right? I think it's deeply unfortunate that such a thing exists. That seems to be the way it's all going. And now it's getting to be the point where I do think that young women are starting to say, well, if I'm going to be casual, and if I'm going to be flighty, and if I'm going to have this kind of things, I might as well be paid for it. I might as well capitalize on this. I might as well make this a monetary relationship exclusively, right? And I don't think that's a healthy way to build a society. I don't think that's a good thing to do, to let the free market of capitalism create this prostitution section. But I don't view prostitutes much differently than I view other workers, right? They're just taking their skill set and they're commodifying it. That's capitalism, baby. That's how it works. Grindr. Forget Grindr. All that shit's annoying. I found out the other day that most of these sites like Grindr or Tinder or any of these, if you're not over 6 feet tall, the app won't even show you to 70% of the women. Like, get fucked. I can't do casual sex. Yeah, everybody's got their thing, man. Like, it's definitely, like, and I think people just want to know. Like, you want to know who you're with. You want to trust them. That's part of it. For sure it is. And absolutely. Like, absolutely. This society praises whoever can grift the hardest. Yeah, even in dating and sex. Yeah. Yeah, I never even been to a strip club either. Just not my kind of thing at all. Yeah. It's not everybody's kind of thing. Yeah, Tinder is trash for sure. All of these apps are garbage, dude. They suck. They all suck. Like, no, it's really, really weird, the society that we live in, right? Because pornography is everywhere. right? Like you can literally be on the subway looking at pornography on your phone, right? Like you can literally like pornography is literally everywhere in the digital space, right? It hasn't manifested into the reality quite yet, right? You're not going to find pornography in like Marvel movies. You're not going to find pornography in like on like billboards and stuff. Like but so it's like isolated, and it's in this place where you can witness any conceivable sexual act you would like, right? That pornography exists freely and openly for you to look at. But this, I think, has created a lot of anxiety within the human community, right? Within the reality community. Because you've got groups of men who have been convinced that women are like this, right? That pornography is how women are, right? And this, I think, has scared the shit out of women in big ways, right? And women are telling us how scared they are, right? Women are saying, and they're being as explicit as they possibly can be. Like, this is the thing that blows me away the most, right? It's not like the traditional line is always like, no, women are so complicated and they don't know what they want, and they always, why don't you just tell me what you want, right? Well, fuck yeah, women have been telling us what they want. They've been telling us they don't want to be scared all the fucking time, right? They've been pretty upfront about it. They're not being esoteric about it. They're not being circuitous about it. Like, they're being very upfront about how fucking scared they are all the time, right? And of course they're scared. They're scared as shit. We've built this terrifying society for them to exist in, right? Where we're not protecting them. We're not trying to protect them. And there's like a hard, cold reality that's sinking in, which is that women are standing around saying, well, we want equality. And it turns out that the equality that they're fighting for is to also get fucking sent to war and blown up and experience terror, right? Because we've created a terror-based society. And then we say to them, don't you want to have sex? No. Like, no. Obviously not. Like, obviously not. And so, like, there's this whole aspect of, like, needing to take, like, an emotional journey with someone in order to build within them the confidence and trust, in order to let the guards down, in order to let the barriers down. And both sides of the discourse is super confused. Absolutely. It's super confusing what's happening. And again, this is another one of these issues. Sex is another one of these issues where there's a lot of vectors, right? It ties into a lot of things, and we lack the capacity to have a serious conversation about it, right? We're childish about it. We're childish about it. We literally have, like, the most hardcore pornography you can see at our fingertips, and we can't have a serious conversation one-to-one with each other about sex and the nature of sex. Really let this sink in. We do not talk about sex with other people. Corporate enterprises have explicitly forbidden it. That it has become a completely taboo subject in any corporate enterprise. If you bring sex up, you will be fired. I've seen it. Like, this is a deep issue for humanity, right? One that has survival implications, and we are confused. We don't know what we're doing about it. We don't know how to rectify this. And the result is that we're literally having people blow up about it, right? The whole incel movement is just these closet nerds, basically, who are despicable. The shit they say about women is unbelievable. It's unbelievable that a grown-up would ever believe what the incels believe. That women are here to serve, all this kind of shit. It's like, did you not go to school? Did we not like try to teach this out of you? This idea that women are slaves to you? And then when it doesn't work out, because obviously it won't, they fucking blow themselves up. Right? Like, there's crazy shit going on that's all tied up in our sexuality, and we just don't talk about it. We just don't. And I gotta be honest, I'm getting a little sick of it. I'm getting a little sick about it. Like, I feel like the reason why people don't want to talk about sex is because it makes people vulnerable, right? It makes the person talking about the sex extremely vulnerable. And talking about your desires and your sexual interests and all this kind of stuff makes you extremely vulnerable. And I'm kind of over it. Like, I am. I'm kind of over it. Like, it's super important for humanity. And if you want to take a look at the health of a nation, take a look at how often people are getting laid, right? And we're not. We're just not, right? Like, people are staying virgins longer. People are having way less sex than even the previous generation, right? Like, this sex is a form of communication, right? And if we're not having sex with one another, we're not communicating. And if we're not communicating, then we can't possibly understand one another. Like, the words that come out of your mouth are not the only form of communication that exists. And might not even be the most important form of communication. Some of the confusion comes for the relative emancipation of the female and the inability of males to navigate that changing landscape. And that's true. This is something I think about a lot, right? That, like, I think that the emancipation of females is a positive, for sure, right? Certainly the female population thinks so. But it has introduced a shifting landscape. We don't know how to navigate this. We don't know what to do about it. We don't know how to act or how to be. We don't know what is or is not appropriate. And it is resulting in a kind of disaster. And while this is going on, while the straights are experiencing this enormous catastrophe, we have this huge upswell of support for homosexuality and trans rights. Again, a success that we should definitely embrace, but it's understandable that there would be people in the society who would go, what the fuck is going on? I don't understand this. I feel abandoned. I feel left out. Anytime I ask questions, I'm called a bigot. Anytime I try to figure out what's happening, or I say the wrong word, or I do any of this kind of stuff, I get completely shit on, and I don't know what's happening in the first place. I think I see a lot of that. And where do these people end up? Well, they end up listening to assholes like Shapiro or Peterson, because at least Shapiro and Peterson are talking to them and not shitting on them and saying, like, I hear what it's a confusing time right now, and your masculinity is important, and you need to stand up and be a man, right? At least they're saying that, right? And it makes complete and total sense that people would gravitate in this direction during this incredible, just like absolute shaking up of what is or is not normal in the society. And the reality is that there's no such thing as a social norm anymore. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing. And even on top of all of this, you have the complete destruction of marriage as an institution. That the millennials and Gen Z and even Gen X to a degree are looking at the institution of marriage being like, what the fuck is this? This seems fucking stupid as shit. You have comedians like John Mulaney saying that, like, when you boil it down, marriage is a terrible contract that no one should sign, and so you have this element as well of, like, marriage as an institution itself has fallen apart, and it's all happening at the same time. And there's no institution, there's not even a person that you can point to who is saying, hey, we should try to resolve this. We should try to create some kind of way to communicate with one another in clean and easy ways what our expectations are, what it is we're looking for, and we should understand that if a person approaches and you don't want to deal with kindness and all of this kind of stuff, but it's tough because there's so many like human emotions and human elements tied up into this. There's a shit ton of vectors, right? There's a shit ton of vectors, and we don't even know how to begin to talk to one another about it, or how to resolve it, or how to figure any of it out. And then you just get into the straight up, like, we're just fucking monkeys aspect of it. Like, dudes are struggling with no means no, right? Like, dudes are struggling with no means no. Like, this is how barbarous our society actually is. Like, the sexual assault stats are real, and you can't do what these fucking right-wing losers do, which is ignore them and pretend as though, like, well, men face all kinds of physical abuse too, and men get this and men get that. So fucking what? So fucking what? I can't think of anything more irrelevant than to say that men also. Like, who cares? Right? Who gives a fuck? Women are sexually assaulted in enormous ways. It's obvious. You can see it. And the whataboutism onto like, oh, well, what about men? Who gives a fuck? We're talking about the sexual assault of women. And if you want to resolve any issue, you've got to actually talk about that issue and accept it for what it is. That women are feeling terrorized by men. And men are doing the terrorizing because we've been placed in this desperate nightmare. Like, it's absurdism wrapped in anxiety, wrapped in the paradox of our need for sexual release versus our desire to not inflict ourselves on the society, right? And like, men are our worst enemies in this conversation, right? Because there's no system or support system of any sort, nothing serious, that actually acknowledges and deals with seriously the needs that men have. And I don't know why we scoff at this. This, in my view, is the absolute barbarous worst thing that we do in regards to sex in our society. That if a man enjoys sex or the appearance of a beautiful woman, he's a pervert. I think that's the absolute most abhorrent thing that I see in this conversation. Even when it's said playfully. Even when it's said like, haha, oh, you little pervert, right? What the fuck are you talking about? Enjoying sex and the appearance of a member of the sex that I am attracted to is perversion. What the fuck? No, it isn't. Like, no, it absolutely is not. And how dare you even joke at me about it? I find that to be extremely offensive. Like, no, it's not. To me, it's like this enormous form of gaslighting. That because I want to have sex with a woman, I'm a pig. What the fuck are you talking about? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, and that's normal. That's just acceptable. You can just call people these things. And it cuts both ways. It cuts both ways. Right? If a woman wants to have sex with a man that she finds attractive, she's a slut. So it cuts both ways. Right? Like, and you can't win, right? Because if you don't want to have sex, well, then you're a prude, right? So you can't win. There's no victory condition here. And I find the whole thing to be disgraceful because it precludes any kind of serious adult conversation about these things. Like, and the reason why we can't have an adult conversation about it is because sex is extremely emotional, and we're an extremely emotional species who refuses to acknowledge that we're driven primarily by emotion, and we refuse to accept and deal with it. Like, who here, hands up? Like, who here took a class in school that was like, hey, you have emotions, here's what they are? Oh, did that not happen? You went to university. Did you get a seminar on what to do about your emotions? No? Was it all just like toughen up? Was that basically it? Just like, toughen up, right? Chip up, right? That's basically what we got. So we're children. We're not even acknowledging our emotional states. We're not even paying attention to the fact that we have emotions. And do you know what happens if you deny that something exists when it most certainly does? Then you're ceding all power and authority to that thing. If you deny that you have emotions and or are oblivious of the reality of your emotional state, then you are ruled completely by your emotions. You have no control of it. You've put no thought into it, right? You're simply reacting to the emotions that you have inside of you. And that's basically what I see in the society, right? That's basically the Petersons. Why do you think Peterson's always crying? You think Peterson has a handle on his emotional self? Right? Like, yeah, some articles discussed emotion. Yeah. Like, we should be discussing emotions every single day. Like, we should be having conversations about how, like, when somebody says, how do you feel? That should be a serious question that we expect a serious answer to. Right? How do you feel? Right? But that's not what happens. You say, fine. Right? Oh, good. Those are the appropriate answers. You're not allowed to say anything else. And you're certainly not allowed to seriously engage in the idea of the collective consciousness or the collective zeitgeist energy, which I love to do. It's one of my favorite things to do. What's the energy of the day? And it's all manifesting itself into a sexual society that sucks. Our society sucks. Everybody's having a terrible time. And nobody wants to even try. Because it's so fucking scary and it's not worth it. And at the end of the day, what do you end up with? Right? You end up with dudes who are just happy to stay at home and jerk it. Right? And then kind of cry into their pillow because they're fucking lonely. Right? Like, tell me that's not every single fucking man in the world right now. Right? All these single men and all these single women crying about how lonely they are, but too scared to go out and do anything about it. Because the world is fucking crazy. Well, and let's discuss this phrase, toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity. Near as I can tell, toxic masculinity is just an asshole. Right? Like, I don't understand why being an asshole has gotten tied up into masculinity at all. What is masculinity in the first place? Like, this is something that I think people ask me occasionally about Zizek, and I don't usually listen that much to Zizek, but the one thing that he did say that I actually found interesting, and I would like to listen more about it, is masculinity doesn't exist. Such a concept is non-existent. Femininity and masculinity do not exist. They're made up entirely. That the whole concept of a big, strong man who's doing all of this kind of chivalrous and all this kind of stuff, this is useful for the military. That's all it is that it's useful for the military to be able to convince people that it's okay to be an asshole as long as you're being an asshole against a brown person that we tell you to kill, right? Like, once again, the trouble is capitalism. Once again, right? This concept of masculinity simply doesn't exist. There is no such thing as masculinity. There's no such thing as femininity. These things are abstractions. Like, is a flower feminine? Or is it just pretty and soft and beautiful? Right? Is it feminine? No such concept exists outside of the abstract self. And attempting to adhere, like, and you might be able to say, like, I'm looking to be feminine, or I would like to show my feminine self, or any of this kind of stuff. But it's an abstraction. That's all it is. And so, what has happened in regards to the masculinity conversation is that if a guy wants to be strong, right, confident, forthright, well, he gets accused of being toxic masculinity, right? Because it's all the same as far as anyone's concerned. It's not helpful. It's not helpful at all. My therapist got me to download an app to track my emotions every hour to see my patterns and how I can change them. Interesting. Yeah. Oh, there's also this. Toxic masculinity is a term used by third wave feminists who will not acknowledge toxic femininity. Yeah, which certainly exists. But at the end of the day, whenever I analyze it, whenever I pay attention to what they say, I'm like, you guys are just talking about assholes. Like, this has nothing to do with masculinity or femininity. This has everything to do with just you being an asshole. Like, you can just be a bastard. Like, you could just be an evil dickhead. It has nothing to do with your masculinity or femininity. It has nothing to do with you being a man or a woman. You're just an asshole. You're just an asshole. Like, I don't know why we're pretending as though this has this idea of toxic masculinity or toxic femininity, why it has any merit whatsoever, right? The only way that all it's done is polluted the discourse completely, right? A person being an asshole has nothing to do with their masculinity or femininity. It's just them being a fucking asshole. I thought this toxic masculinity shit was people trying to give name to the John Wayne Christian masculinity that still influences us today. I mean, isn't that interesting? Christian masculinity. There's a like, that strikes me as more interesting because Christianity itself is something of an abstraction, right? The abstract idea that we should pay attention to this text and this book and this leader that from ancient times. And so it makes it more valuable to say, like, Christian masculinity because it's already an abstraction. Oh, excuse me. To threaten the DPRK, the U.S., good to see you, by the way, Mocked, have launched 20 fighter jets south of the Korea. Yeah, they're doing a lot of that kind of shit right now. China and Canada just had a bit of a tiff over Canada flying fighter jets over China and China flying fighter jets close to it. What is an example of toxic femininity that we are systematically put upon by it? But, like, what's... Like, certainly there's a patriarchal structure, right? Like, certainly there's a patriarchal structure. I mean, I don't think that's deniable, right? That the structure of the patriarchy has denied women rights for a long time and is still trying to do it, right? That's pretty clearly the case. That men have been in control of the levers of power for a long time and have been passing laws and have been doing lots of things. You can point to stuff as, like, women weren't allowed to have bank accounts by themselves until the 80s. Like, come on. Anybody who wants to deny the existence of the patriarchy just delegitimizes themselves intellectually. For sure. Right? So the systemic existence of the patriarchy, right, and that men are the ones who have traditionally been in control, in my perspective, doesn't actually have anything to do with masculinity or this concept of toxic masculinity, right? Like, if you want to have a conversation about the patriarchy, that's one conversation, and we should have that conversation. But trying to jam in this concept of toxic masculinity is just a way to poison the conversation, because it's not a thing that exists. Like, for real, like, what's the difference between saying, oh, that guy's has toxic masculinity and that guy's an asshole to women? Like, I don't find this phrase toxic masculinity or toxic femininity to be particularly useful or interesting. And it makes the conversation much harder to have. It makes it much harder to have. Like, and a guy can, and it's alienating in big and serious ways. In big and serious ways. Is that girl power or just neoliberal pandering? I mean, neoliberal pandering is all over the place. Doesn't TERFs search... I have a controversial position on TERFs, by the way. I don't share this very much, but I'll share it with you guys because you seem cool. I do think that it is understandable why groups of people would be uncertain, maybe is the good word to use. Why they would not just jump on board with this. Why they would have concerns. A lot of this stuff is happening very fast. But at the same time, Kaya, you're bringing up something really, really good here. The painting of predators and groomers, in my view, is extremely dangerous. What we're seeing with that conversation, the people who are trying to pretend that homosexuals and trans people are groomers, those people are out for blood. Like, let's not fuck around here with this one, because this, I think, is very serious. Very, very serious. Like, I have a lot of abstract conversations that I don't think amount to much of anything, but this conversation, the people who are saying that trans people are groomers have the intention to round up trans people and hurt them. That's what they're doing, right? Because they don't have any evidence, they don't have any facts, right? And anytime they have this grooming conversation, I'm like literally, dude, like, what about Jeffrey Epstein's, like, child rape island? Like, you don't give a fuck about that at all. But when it comes to trans people, oh, these guys are groomers for sure. Where's your evidence? What's your facts? What do you got? And the answer is nothing. They've got nothing. They just assume that the internet is fucking kids up, right? Karen's calling cops people barbecuing in a park. Yeah, much like Sockdem serves capital and preserves it. I think people conflate toxic masculinity as something similar to bad behavior of women, when whether we like it or not, it is patriarchal society we find ourselves in. I mean, like, for me, the toxic masculinity phrase, like, look, it all comes down to just basic respect, right? Like, if you're a man and you're treating a woman with respect, then you can be masculine. But if you're a man and you're being an asshole to a woman, especially if it's because she's a woman, right? If you're a chauvinist, then it's toxic masculinity. And I just, like, the phrase doesn't seem to matter to me. Like, we had the language for it already, and I don't think that the phrase toxic masculinity or toxic femininity is actually adding anything beneficial. In my view, it's poisoning the well. It's making the conversation harder to have, right? And it's not surprising that it's just more or less an accusation, right? It's just an accusation you throw at somebody, right? And it especially frustrates any conversation you want to have about the relationships between men and women, right? And, like, if you just talk about the relationships between men and women, is that toxic masculinity? Like, the term toxic masculinity is something thought up by middle-class wine mom types intent on furthering their career choices. Seems like. Yeah, ultimately power has a weird habit of terminating into the hands of men. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, bud. Like, and you know what? We are reaching the end here. This is a good one. Let's keep talking about this. I'm going to keep bringing up sex. Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me, because honestly, guys, it's way more important, and we're just kind of ignoring it as a societal subject, right? I am scared to come back to see you. I feel like I have a target on me. Okay, I hope that has nothing to do with anything I've done. I hope that has nothing to do with anything I've done. You're quite lovely, and I'm so glad that you're here. And all I want to do is make the world a safe place for people, because that's what matters to me the most, right? Like, what matters the most, and the thing that I think that we're not really addressing is that people don't feel safe anymore. Nobody feels safe. Like, and people are admitting it and saying it out loud, and we're just ignoring it or dismissing it. I hope that this is a safe space, and that we can all feel safe together, existing just as we are and as we want to be, without feeling as though there's any violence coming our way, let alone judgment. Anyway, guys, I hope you're all doing well. Like, share, subscribe. Always remember, you are a quantum being, living in quantum energy. The billionaire class is spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Revolt, rebel, repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.